What is up, RotoGrinders? Welcome to the Pick Six Show. Bye weeks are happening. We have a 10-game slate on DK, an 11-game slate on FanDuel. John Daigle established the run. Rich Hribar, sharp football analysis. You know him from the worksheet as well. We are going to have to plow through the football content because we are all super excited to talk about our movie later on in the show. Even if you don't normally stick around for the movie, this is the one time I think you should stick around for the movie. We're going to give you an hour and a half NFL content. We'll talk a little bit of tiptoes later on. Rich, you selected it. Again, we're going to put that in the back burner, but we're excited to talk about it. How's week 6 looking for you? A lot of injuries. We got a 4K quarterback. It's going to be a wild week, far as I can tell. How are things in your world? How do we feel about week 6?
Yeah, we're feeling pretty good, except for the alarming rate of just more people we keep losing starters. I'm just waiting for one piece of good news. I'll tell you, AJ Brown practiced today. We got one guy back, so we're getting one back. But
Wayne Thomas.
The Eagles, all the Eagles are coming back. But we saw Michael Pittman's gonna be out. Obviously, Derek Carr's gonna be out. I killed the Saints. 2 weeks in, I'm like, everything's looking good. This as we predicted, and all the Saints died. Every offensive player they have is just nuked right now. They lost 3 linemen. Derek Carr's out. I mushed them. I absolutely mushed the Saints. So I apologize to everyone that was on that train with Rashid Shaheed. I killed him.
Producer TJ, Saint fan. He's not even with us anymore. You killed him so badly. Saints.
He left too. Off. Even he left.
We got producer Steve with us. Daigle, how about yourself? You won our movie contest. I assume you had a good week in week 5. Anything you want to touch on as far as week 5 and moving forward? Week 6, we have we have some big boy games. We have 50 plus totals. Scoring might be back in the NFL, at least for some teams. Yeah. Maybe it's back. Touchdowns. They're happening. And they can score now. That's nice.
This was the first Sunday my head was on a swivel. Maybe that's also why I felt like this is the first week I finally hit the 3 Oaks week. It's much better than being in the red everywhere. That's okay. But no Joe Burrow. Instead saw what the Sims were shooting out and decided to run the Ravens defense against what was the winning quarterback in double stack. So that's always fun. But still, good week. Won the movie contest. Excited to talk about everything. And speaking of all the injuries, I will give a couple of names here, Dean, because I'm in a 14-team league. And if you think waivers are thin in 12-team leagues, if you are in a 14-team league this year, you are looking at just today, Xavier Hutchinson, Jalen Coker, Mason Tipton, Ezekiel Elliott. Those are some of the names that were picked up. We are desperate out here with injuries and buys.
That is brutal. The 14-teamer. I recognize most of those names, but it's sad that Zeke is in that group now. But that's kind of where he's fallen these days. And you might be rounding up to get maybe a 16-team league. You consider Zeke 14. I don't know.
Also, what's wild? There's been so many injuries, and Daigle, you write a column every week on it. But there's been so many injuries. But I don't think waivers haven't even been good this year.
No, Jordan Mason, Dontavian Wicks, which it depends who you ask if that's good or not. There's never been more vitriol online than the people who suggested pick up Dontavian Wicks and the people who then picked up Dontavian Wicks. And
what's the one catch, right? If he catches that one catch, then it's a different conversation.
Then no one complains at all.
Yeah.
I had a lot of crazy Dontavian Wicks start sits though on Sunday, because anytime you have everyone on every show where people are like Dontavian Wicks, and people are just like, should I bench Jamar Chase for Dontavian Wicks?
Right.
Because they hear the name, they get inundated with so much. They're just like, oh my gosh, I have to put this dude in the lineup. And I got so many crazy Dontavian Wicks start sits.
It's the equivalent of 16 six leg, 10 leg parlays, and you come one short. It's like, of course you came one short. There's a reason why you have to get all the legs.
What were you expecting? There's a reason why they're going to pay you, 20x or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
You do the show every single week on ETR for the not start sit stuff. It's the waiver wire stuff?
I do. For anyone listening, we never plug the stuff at the top. So for anyone listening, it is waiver wire I publish the column. It's a rough draft Monday night after the game. And then I'll have it done around 10 a.m., 9 a.m. Eastern for sure for everybody. And then it's the podcast, which is free on the Establish the Run feed. The rest of season Top 150 show, which is free on the Establish the Run feed. You can go listen to that right after this show, by the way. And then I'm in the Discord as well on Friday for those fun start, sit Dontavian Wicks or CeeDee Lamb questions at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, I don't know much about Xavier Hutchinson, but yeah, what a bummer of a week there for Houston. Maybe it'll finally be a Tank Dell season,
but nothing nice.
Not good. It's not good.
Yeah. We might get CMC back like week 10, according to reports, but we'll see. Stay tuned on that. But this is week 6. We care about week 6 and week 6 only when we're talking about daily fantasy sports. Do want to see what's up in the chat there. Hey, if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like button. Do subscribe. Do turn on those notifications. Do all those things to help us keep the lights on. We appreciate y'all joining us. Some do join us live. What's up to the live chat? And many listen to us on the replay. That's perfectly fine. To be clear, if you guys don't know at this point, we record this Wednesday night. So, content changes. Things are fluid. Wednesday nights, typically 8 o'clock on the East Coast. Okay. Pretty clear, Daigle. I think it was pretty clear as far as like the haves and have-nots, as far as, the 10-game, 11-game slate. The game on FanDuel was pretty interesting. Cincinnati Giants, that one certainly makes for a different slate over there, especially if we get Zach Moss not going. And that can certainly change things because Brown is really, really cheap on FanDuel. But, we have some pretty clear Detroit, Dallas, 50 total, Washington, Baltimore, 50-plus total, and then Pittsburgh and Vegas, AOC, the quarterback there for Vegas. It looks like an absolute disaster. Wilson's healthy, but I assume it's not going to be him this week. We'll see. Some quarterback changes. New England, they're throwing Drake out there because why not? What does it matter at this point? 38 total, and then of course the Chargers coming back from their bye, 35.5 total. So the slate almost kind of feels a little bit smaller with a couple of these games. You can kind of sort of somewhat cross out. Any thoughts on that? Rich, you're kind of shaking your head. Do you see it the same way? Like the slate kind of feels a little bit smaller than even the 10 or 11 games?
Yeah, because you didn't even mention the Raiders, like their quarterback changed too. So, we've got just like a couple of dead spots here that feel really rough, right? Like some of these games when I hit them and wrote them up, I was like, I don't know if this is a real football game, right? Like Broncos Chargers really felt like a not real football game as I was writing that one up, especially looking at the way like those two defenses have played and Harbaugh's doing his thing where like they just don't throw, even though they haven't been able to run successfully for a couple of weeks. Now the Broncos are playing good defense. It's rough. Maybe we have some fun ones. Colts Titans could be fun. There's some sneaky upside in that one, maybe.
We're going to talk about it positions. Don't worry.
And then Bengals Giants, like Dean said, if you do play on FanDuel, like that, it makes the entire slate different because like Daniel Jones is in play. The Bengals defense has been so bad. Like they're the carnival team this year because they've got a capable offense and their target tree actually has shrunk. Losing Tyler Boyd. Like we've got T. Higgins and Jamar Chase now, just like kind of like both of these guys had 30% target shares. Like they're kind of the fun team this year. Like every Bengals game feels like the one.
Was it Dallas like 5 years ago, 4 years ago? I feel like it's that kind of like the shades of old Dallas. Just whatever Dallas is playing, you stack against Dallas, and Dallas was kind of predictable as well. But all right, we'll touch on that later on. We go as far as our favorite plays, position by position. John, you want to open it up? Game 1 is you're welcoming Arizona back. Arizona's back in our lives. Arizona's taking on the Packers here, John. 48 total. Green Bay's a 5-point favorite. This game would probably be more fun in the Dome in Arizona, but it's in Green Bay. Your thoughts? Where do you want to start? Dealer's choice, Packers and the Cardinals.
The only other one that I thought about putting in place of this one was, as Rich said, Titans Colts, but with so many moving pieces there, I felt as if it was just necessary to wait on it and instead mention the plays we're interested in that game. Also, like maybe Panthers Falcons is sneaky, but I don't feel like talking about the Panthers Falcons. Let's get the Cardinals and Packers back on here. And I want to start with the Cardinals side because I think what we've seen so far from Kyler Murray, who did come back into our lives as a top 12 quarterback this week, is that if you allow the Cardinals to play as they want to, they are very clearly a running team. I would argue that James Conner is the engine of this offense, despite what we want them to be with Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., everyone else getting involved. And so honestly, kind of where I start this game is how you dictate the game script. And if you think the Cardinals are going to win, compete, or win handedly, because if so, the way we attack is through James Conner. Like this Titans back or the backfield, the Packers has not been able to stop. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. It's the first start of the show. Let me do this again. The Titans backfield was the only one to not log a top 12 running back against Green Bay this year. That's what I meant to say. Kyron Williams last week, of course, got there against the Packers in that game. Aaron Jones over 100 yards from scrimmage prior. Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley in Brazil. Everyone And so I think it's going to be more of a game for Connor, 6th in carries in the league. He's the only running back on the entire roster to handle a touch inside the 5-yard line this season. And kind of that's where I want to start with this game, and then run it back with some Packers receivers.
We're expecting Dobbs back this week. Wicks, again, people were disappointed last week, but he's still going to be the third guy, I assume, with Watson being out. Melton, surprisingly, I don't know if it's he didn't get as many routes as some people were expecting. I thought he would get more as well. I think he was 4th as far as routes run amongst the receivers last week, or maybe tied for 3rd. It wasn't very good. If we're playing, so this is a tricky thing here, John, right? It's like Packer roulette as far as the receivers. We like Reed the most. Dobbs, are we going to make any sort of narrative here? Are we going to do any kind of squeaky wheel, or are we going to is he still pouting? How do we handle this? Or is there anybody projected?
The entire thesis of Dontavian Wicks is that Romeo Dobbs, even when he's on the field, has just been strictly a touchdown or bust guy. In his 2 games with Jordan Love this year, he was the wide receiver 48 and wide receiver 54, an 18.5% target share. Where Dontavian Wicks, again, the issues last week, the big drop, but still the splash play and ceiling option we want to roster. Not over Jayden Reed, of course. Jayden Reed is still the king himself above everyone here. But Dontavian Wicks still at 5,200. It's different from the season-long DFS market because usually the DFS guys, they understand the bounce-back repercussions. But Wicks led the team in targets in back-to-back games now, leads the team in both red zone and end zone targets, was the wide receiver 3 behind Jayden Reed in week 4, who was the wide receiver 2. So I think that's how the pecking order goes for me, is Jayden Reed, then Wicks, depending on the salary we have left over from the Cowboys-Lions game. We'll get there soon enough. And then Dobbs after that, but I don't think I'll be playing Dobbs in this slate.
Rich, how do you feel about the Green Bay receivers? Feel free to jump on Jacobs as well, the quarterback situation, just the Packers as a whole. And I guess we should talk about Kraft, who, broke the slate as the chalk tight end, which never seems to happen. But that
got me.
That did it. Got me too. I usually lean in and I'm like, oh, come on, really? This guy's be 30% owned, whatever it is, and everybody in their cash lineup throws their cash lineup in tournaments. Yeah, 2 touchdowns for him. Game over if you didn't play Kraft.
He's the only one I played. I had to suck it up somewhere. Faded the rest of the game, just got lucky that apparently he's the GOAT tight end of 2024.
Yeah, and Musgrave might be back. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
He had the long touchdown and got there. I was the same way. I faded the Packers passing game last week and was in on Jacobs because of the Rams in general. Teams don't throw a lot of passes on him. It was right. The Packers only threw 26 passes in that game. When you get the 66-yard touchdown and then you follow it up with another touchdown, it's hard to beat that at tight end. This is in the year of 2024, our tight end lords. If you just catch a touchdown, you're on the board.
You're optimal.
Right? I played in a college fantasy football league for years, and it has a tight end spot, and there's 4 good tight ends in college football, and you just every year it's just I hope my guy catches a touchdown. That's how it's been this year playing DFS fantasy football this year. So you're just man, I hope my tight end gets catch a touchdown pass. It'd be really great because then he's probably going to be a top 5 tight end. And Kraft got in there twice. He was the first guy to repeat. He was tight end 1 2 weeks in a row, which never happens. But I want to go back to Jacobs though. Because we saw in the normal game script, in the 2 weeks before when they didn't really play normal game scripts, he only had 48% and 52% of the backfield touches, but it was right back up to 76% last week in a normal game where they were able to kind of run the football. They're home favorites again against another soft run defense. I kind of want to go back to him as well in this spot because I think a lot of people will run back Reed, they'll run back Wicks, and Kraft is absolutely getting run back this week to the point where I might even play him. But this Packers passing game has been a little funky, and they're back to doing the same stuff they were doing at the front of last year. Jordan Love is only ahead of Anthony Richardson in completion rate, and his off-target throw rate is the 8th lowest. It's just that they're back to just throwing prayer balls. His expected completion rate is 23rd in the league. When this offense kind of calibrated last year and got really cooking, they kind of reined in hair on fire Jordan Love, and he became an efficient passer. And they're kind of back to that right now where they're taking strictly vertical shots. 40% of his throws are 10 yards or further downfield. That's 3rd in the NFL. He's throwing the ball at the 4th highest rate, 20 yards or further downfield. And over the final 11 games of last year, his rates were severely cut in half. And he was a lot more efficient. He hasn't even completed 60% of his passes in a game yet this season. And then he's also getting blitzed at the highest rate of any quarterback in the NFL. And he's been awful against the blitz so far. He's 29th in the league in rating against the blitz, just ahead of Andy Dalton, Will Levis, and Anthony Richardson so far. When he's not been blitzed, he's sixth. He's actually he's thrown for 9.7 yards for a pass attempt when he hasn't been blitzed, compared to 4.5 yards for pass attempt when he has been blitzed. The Arizona Cardinals are blitzing a little bit more this year, but they typically have been a passive defense under Jonathan Gannon, and they're not getting pressure. So maybe this is a spot where you can have some clean pockets and bounce back. But the Cardinals are another one of these teams. They don't face a lot of pass attempts either because, one, they're not good. And then two, when teams do throw, they usually complete passes against them. So they're efficient. You tend to face more passes when the other team throws incompletions. And that's not what the Cardinals are doing. So it's kind of another spot where I don't see a lot of pass volume for this group. So I kind of want to play it through the Jacob side again.
Yeah, I like that call as well. I made that mistake. One of my unwritten rules, and sometimes you break them. And I was over the field on both. Love. I don't like to play quarterbacks that they can't really get there with their legs and that are popular. That's what Love was last week, and that's what
he's not like CJ Stroud.
Yeah, and I tend to not play Stroud either. And that's what. Oh God, why am I brain farting? I can't remember the name of the quarterback for San Francisco.
Purdy.
Yeah, Purdy. Same deal. A guy that just can't really get there. 303, and those are the two of the most popular quarterbacks. And I broke my rules.
They were great at getting inside the 10-yard line. They were there. Punching it in has been a big issue for that 49ers offense this year.
If it was a 90-yard field, we would have been in the money last week, I suppose. But
maybe the best offense in the league. Yeah.
So Kyler, does anybody want to make a case for Kyler? Certainly McBride. I think McBride's still going to have one of these games. I think it's coming. I'm still willing to bet on it as an interesting run back. You guys talked about, or I guess, John, you were talking about Connor. Rich, are you on board with Connor? Would you play both running backs?
Yeah, I mean, they were in a similar spot last week. They were larger road dogs last week against a better defense, and Connor still, was the guy that kind of pushed him there in the second half. The weird thing about Kyler, I mean, if the whole game was built out of the first quarter, like the Cardinals would be amazing, right? Like in the first quarter, they're absolutely amazing. Kyler Murray in the first quarter of games has completed 83% of his passes, 10.3 yards per pass attempt, 5 touchdowns, no interception. The second they get off script, the rest of the game, 63% completion rate, 5.9 yards per pass, and only 2 touchdown passes. Like Daigle said, though, I've been talking about, because the Cardinals have come up on the show multiple times. I do another show on Fridays with Hilo. We talk about this. Drew Petzing, amazing run game coordinator in designing their own game. They do nothing creative in the passing game. I mean, Marvin Harrison is the antithesis of where Drew Petzing struggles right now. I mean, look at what Marvin Harrison is working through right now. He's only played 16% of his snaps in the slot. Only 34% of his targets have been shorter than 10 yards downfield. That's 61st among all wide receivers with 100 or more targets. 26% of his targets, 20 or more yards downfield. That's the 12th highest among that group. As a byproduct, only 14% of his yards come after the catch. That's 70th out of 76 wide receivers that have run 100 more routes. 25% of his routes have just been go routes. The only wide receivers with a higher rate on that same list are Xavier Worthy, Mike Williams, and Josh Reynolds. 32% of his targets are go routes, only behind Keon Coleman, Mike Williams, and Calvin Ridley. Like, he's getting his target share stuff looks good. He's just running a lot of inefficient routes and getting a lot of inefficient opportunities for fantasy football. He's basically been touchdown or bust. 60% of his fantasy points are touchdowns only. So, I mean, Drew Petzing just hasn't done enough creativity in this passing game, like Dale kind of hinted at.
Even last week, half of his receiving yards were on that. It was an amazing play, don't get me wrong, but Kyler just extending the play and throwing up a prayer in man coverage to just extend that last drive. And then all they did was run the ball 5 times to get in field goal position to kill the 49ers.
He's also not cheap, which I think is worth noting. Like, it feels like he should be a little bit cheaper. Yeah. I think 7.2 is a little bit overpriced on DK. Now you're probably going to get an ownership discount on that for sure. But yeah, I think I'd rather play, if I'm playing Murray, I'm looking for a pairing partner. I think McBride makes more sense. Would you agree with that, Rich?
Yeah, 100%. The usage for McBride is largely fine. He's not. So here's the thing with McBride is it's really weird because he's averaging like almost 2 full yards below yards per catch than he did last year, but his downfield targets are way up. He just hasn't really converted those. I mean, that's been a Kyler issue ongoing for the last couple of years. If you look at Kyler's splits, like on throws 10 yards or further downfield, he's been one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL the past 3 years. And like there was an excuse that said like, all right, well, when he had DeAndre Hopkins, he was largely fine, and they haven't had any receivers. Marv was supposed to solve that, and then they're just not doing enough kind of creative things in the offense to get these downfield targets to connect in this offense. But the usage is fine for McBride. He's also another guy that like you keep paying for, and you want to keep chasing the tail, right? We're martingaling Trey McBride a little bit, and you're just not getting it, right? I did the same thing last week. The second Shakir was out, I was like, this is the Kincaid week, right? This is it.
Yeah,
this is it.
Me too.
Guess what? It was not the Kincaid.
It's a nobody week. It was a nobody week.
George Kittle scored the touchdown, and I still think the meta so far, we did nail that, is that paying up for tight end, especially when like paying up for tight end this year is really only spending in the 5Ks.
Yeah, it has not worked, right? Paying up for tight end, but I still, maybe I'm just trying to will it to happen, but I really think we're going to get a McBride big game soon. Maybe it's this week. John, you got anything else as far as Arizona, this game in general?
I'm not going to get to Michael Wilson, but I think also part of the problem is that I initially thought Michael Wilson leading the team and target share and air yards was because a couple of weeks ago, Trey McBride was out for concussion. But now it's becoming an extended problem because the last 3 games, he has just 2 fewer targets than Marvin Harrison Jr., like Rich said, because MHJ is not being schemed up anything progressive or intelligent. In that time as well, Michael Wilson has not dipped below a 20% target share. So it's definitely becoming a problem that limits MHJ's ceiling at that salary. And then, yeah, if you want to play Tucker Kraft, like I just think it's as simple as whenever an athletic tight end does not leave the field, like with David Njoku, anyone else you can name, that's the signal. Like that's what we want. And Tucker Kraft does not leave the field. Now on Jordan Love's 3 starts, he's run around in over 80% of dropbacks, and he has the South Dakota State record for power clean. Like he basically had the same draft capital. He basically had the same
what
draft
was that record
capital.
stuck in there?
The say that's a record that exists, yes, and he owns it because he was an absolute freak athlete coming out of college. He basically had the same draft capital as Luke Musgrave, so it was always a toss-up. And Musgrave, for a while there last year until his injury, was in the running seat. But since that time, like just the fact that Kraft tore his pec, basically missed the entire offseason, suffered another injury before the season, and yet Musgrave can't even get on the field at all. Like that tells you how much they trust and have confidence in Kraft. Also leads every tight end in missed tackles force. Again, like that long touchdown, a little bit of luck box, sure, but that was Jeremy Shockey. You're not going to stop me. I'm going to stiff arm you to hell, and I'm going to keep running this ball.
Speaking of it, a tight end, once upon a time, that remember tight ends against Arizona was a thing. Is that still a thing or not really a thing? Or like anybody versus Arizona is a thing now, right? Like essentially, it doesn't matter the position.
I mean, I told you guys, like I'm in week 6 of writing the worksheet, and like when we talk about like defensive stuff and some trends that are going on at leagues, and like I don't even really bring up like defenses versus tight end stats this year because like nobody's faced any tight the tight end's been such a bad position that like you can't even like use it as like a North Star, like anyone being good because the position's been so bad.
Tucker Kraft, George Kittle, Jake Ferguson, and Travis Kelce, who it took a little bit of luck, but now the run out is far too pure to consider Travis Kelce anything else but the tight end one.
Maybe Schultz now that Collins is out. I don't know. Am I trying to make that happen, or that's not going to happen? That's not going to happen.
He's already played a game with Dell out and didn't do anything, and then basically played a whole game with Collins out last week and didn't do anything.
I'm worried about.
And we knew last year too. When one of the guys was out, Schultz was fine last year. But now they go 3 deep, so they always have another guy, and that's also kind of been the roadblock again. Nico
Collins was the one that the others can't do what he does. They can't replicate that. So I'm kind of worried. As great as CJ Stroud is, I'm kind of just worried about the overall construct of that offense.
And they're playing the Patriots this week. It's Drake May's first career start. Like, we could get nothing in that game. They could probably sleepwalk to like a 23-10 win or something in that game and not really have any fireworks. And Bobby Slowick's still doing his thing where like he wants CJ Stroud to pull the offense out of the gates of hell at every 3rd and 7 because they ran on 1st and 2nd down.
Yeah, Houston versus New England definitely feels like a Milton Berle game for sure. You mentioned, by Kraft, not expected to be heavily owned, which is kind of interesting. Again, this is Wednesday night. But we currently have them like at 3-4% because, well, in part, you guys kind of teased it. The Dallas-Detroit game, it's not that much more for Ferguson. Ferguson, I think, is going to be clearly more popular. Okay, let's move on. We'll put that game. That game is now on deck. Yeah, is that surprising to you? Because I
think it's surprising. Well, just because he's gotten there 2 weeks in a row, he's not expensive. His price barely went up.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see. But I think in a vacuum, for getting ownership, for getting anything, just straight up, who do you prefer, Ferguson or Kraft? I assume it's Ferguson. Maybe not.
I think we'll talk about it when we get there.
Okay.
It's tough. I'm very mixed on it.
I'm surprised that it's okay. Fair enough. So it's a bit tighter than I expect. Okay.
I kind of think, I don't know. Are we doing that game now or no?
We're doing Washington Baltimore next.
Okay.
We can switch it up. I don't think it matters. If you wanted to segue to Detroit Dallas,
we're not going to be talking about late swapping. So yeah.
I just feel like that game, if they're out of the 3 games, has the most trap potential. I think it's the Detroit game.
Oh, okay. That's not the angle. That's not the angle I was coming from. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, anytime that I look at the state of this Dallas defense right now with the injuries they have, Micah Parsons doesn't look like he's going to play. Dexter Lawrence still going to be out. Marshawn Nealon was lost basically last week. And when you play the Lions, what's going to happen? Like, they're just going to run the ball down your throat. They're going to run down your throat. And this Cowboys offense, through regression, and we've seen this through a number of teams, right? And like, regression works in different ways. But I mean, I remember I wrote an article this summer about all these offenses that were expected to regress. It was, 49ers, every list, like 49ers, Lions, Dolphins, Cowboys were like the 4 teams that kept popping regular. Like, these teams are going to have some pullback, and it works in different ways. Like what's that?
Are you 4-0 early results?
Like, pretty much. I mean, the 49ers are moving the hell out of the football, but they're just, they're having bad luck in the red zone because, again, regression works in mysterious ways. The Dolphins lost Tua. Like, there's all these things. The Cowboys have had a bunch of injuries, and they are finding some pieces. I think there's some pieces that are interesting in this game, but I'm worried that we're just going to see the Lions kind of handle business. And the Lions, they've given up good rate stats to quarterbacks, but like they haven't allowed multiple passing touchdowns in any game this season. Like, they are getting to the quarterback a lot still too. And the Cowboys lost their left tackle last week. So Dak hasn't really gotten there for fantasy. I mean, I like CeeDee Lamb in this game, but you pay for him. But I think that this game overall, like, there's an outcome where like the Lions run the shit out of football in this game.
So
10-minute drives.
I don't even disagree. I was coming at it from the Lions putting up a 40 burger, and I want 2 or 3 pieces. Like, I don't even need a run back. I think the Lions go nuclear in this game, and I want those pieces. So that's the angle I was coming from.
Well, let's talk about those pieces you like. I should introduce the game. Detroit, Dallas. Dallas is getting 3 points at home, 52.5 total, biggest total we have on the board. Second biggest one we'll talk about in a second. But John, talk about Detroit, and maybe just play Gibbs. Play Gibbs and pair him with one of the receivers. You don't necessarily need Goff. You tell me, how are you prioritizing the Lions this week?
Well, in the offseason, let's go all the way back, because after that loss, when Dan Campbell was crying following the conference championship defeat by the 49ers, he came out and he said in his presser, it's like, it's not as easy as, just showing back up and being the Lions. Everything has to be reassessed because the league changes year to year. It's different than the Cowboys, who are still trying to use 2 tight ends because they saw Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez do it one time. It's incredible. And so for the Lions, like, what they've kind of done to find their identity early, and maybe it's because Jared Goff was struggling early, I don't know, but they have become David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs' team. More importantly, David Montgomery. Like, this team has the 4th lowest raw pass rate on the year, 3rd lowest pass rate over expectation, and they're really just riding those 2 running backs. It's kind of the same way how they played the Cowboys last season too. In that one, David Montgomery had 15 carries, Jahmyr Gibbs had 14. So honestly, both players, if you want to play both running backs, honestly, without Goff, if you want to play Montgomery and Amon-Ra St. Brown, like, the Cowboys are still scheming 75% of their snaps from zone coverage. And St. Brown, I don't need to tell you he's a target hog, but he's been targeted at the 10th highest rate against zone coverage this year. So I kind of do like getting, even if you want to throw in Sam Laporta, now 14 days extended rest to heal that low ankle sprain, had 12 targets in this matchup last year. I kind of like 2 or 3 pieces without Goff in this game and just trying to soak up the Lions' touchdowns. The Cowboys also, remember, like, who they've had to push back with this injured defense now the last 2 weeks. It was the Giants and Steelers on the road. And then in their last 3 games, I mean, the Ravens, remember, took it to them until garbage time when the Cowboys clawed back. Before that, the Saints in one of their 2 games this year went for over 40 points against them. And then, of course, the playoff game where Aaron Jones had a statue resurrected of himself by halftime. So, like, dude, this is just a game like that you say we show up next week and say when the Cowboys lose, they lose, because the Lions could just go atomic here.
Rich, what do you have as far as Detroit? And touch on, speaking of going atomic, Amon-Ra's been like steady, right? He's been fine, but there's not one game where he's like, whoa, man, I really wish I played Amon-Ra. Like you didn't need any of his games this year. And he's still not cheap. Like his salary is not going down. He's at 8-1. Again, he's been fine. Putting up steady games, but nothing really usable, nothing really destroying you either. Is that ceiling taking a hit with the rise of JMO? It's kind of, I feel like we touched on this earlier in the year, and we still haven't seen the explosive game. Maybe it comes, maybe it doesn't. Can we see it coming this week? The rest of the Lions, what else you got here?
Detroit? I mean, it just depends on how much pushback we get, right, from the Dallas side. Because we've seen the first 2 weeks Goff played bad, because he even had 19 targets in week 2 and had like a regular game, like an Amon-Ra game. We would, Garrett Wilson does that. Everyone gets mad. Everyone's like mad at Garrett Wilson still, but that was like the kind of the game. He had the Garrett Wilson game, in week 2, where he had like 11 for like 110 or whatever and a touchdown. And then the last 2 weeks, the Lions just were efficient. Like this is the other thing with the Lions. Like when they're efficient, they just don't throw a lot of passes. And Goff was 18 of 18 the last time we saw him play. For like 17 yards a pass attempt. Like I think it was 16.2 yards.
Not the player of the game though. Not the best player of the game according to his coach.
That's why I love Dan Campbell, man. Like he's a treasure, man.
He's fun.
I do like him a lot. So you always have that outcome with the Lions, and that's kind of happened with some of these pieces because now you add Jameson Williams, whose target share has gone down every single week this season from the game prior. I mean, obviously there's gonna be a dead cat bounce because he's out there on the field so much, and he's so good. Even last time we saw him, he only had 2 targets, and then one is a 70-yard touchdown, right? Like he's a 1-target type of player, which is always, those guys are always kind of fun in fantasy football. It's frustrating, but also fun because you can get out of a hole very quickly. So they just kind of cannibalize each other from a volume stance, right? Like that's the old Seahawks used to be like this in like old Russell Wilson days, right? Like they were just so efficient. They never threw a lot of passes and their guys never got a lot of targets. Obviously we have Amon-Ra getting a lot of targets, but it's hurt Laporta. And obviously we've seen this last month now since the season opener, we've seen fewer and fewer targets for Jameson Williams. So that kind of happens. You kind of guess, and you have to pay for Laporta. You have to pay for Amon-Ra. And you have to pay for Jameson Williams now. So it makes it kind of tricky for those guys. The backfield, though, is number 1 in the NFL in opportunities per game. They average 34.5 backfield touches per game. So you can kind of get cute with those guys a little bit and put them together to get unique. We haven't seen Jahmyr Gibbs hasn't caught a pass in 2 games, which is very odd. I think that will, obviously change. And then we got a couple of cheap pieces in here, like the Jalen Tolbert of the world this week, if you're looking for like the pay down wide receiver, because they played on Sunday night. And if he would had 10 targets, maybe in the afternoon on Sunday, he'd be priced up a little bit higher.
Brandon Cooks on the IL for Dallas. And maybe the thought process here, Rich, and I'm going to ask you to touch on Dallas, is like if you're playing Amon-Ra, you try to force a run back because like that's what you need. You need a pushback to get Amon-Ra. And if you're not, then I'm just trying to like figure out, because if you're going to spend for him, you want to get, more than 5 or 6 or 7 targets. You want a high volume. And the way to get high volume is for Dallas to punch back, which we're not so. I mean, I saw 3-point dogs at home, and I'm like, that makes sense. At first, I was like, oh wow, Dallas, no respect. But wait a second, this actually checks out. I think that's right. I think Detroit is distinctly better than Dallas.
I wonder how many times Dallas has been a home underdog multiple times, in a season, like because the Ravens were favored there too a few weeks ago. Yeah,
and you touched on the injuries, of course. That
they got a lot of guys.
Defensively, and the O-line, they lost one of their top guys end of that game last time out. I haven't seen if they're probably not coming back. Right? You talk about Parsons, unlikely to go this week.
He's questionable. It's up in the air. It doesn't look like Lawrence is going to play. They will get Deron Bland back, I think, in some capacity, but they're on bye next week, so I think they're going to try to lick their wounds a little bit like the Eagles did. And remember, the Eagles, when they had all those guys hurt 2 weeks ago against the Bucs, like they just no-showed in that game.
Gave it up. Yeah. We'll take the L, move on, and we'll come back in 2 weeks and absolutely destroy Cleveland.
Have you guys seen that thing with the Lions going around, like the theory about playing the Lions? And we don't get to see it because the Cowboys are on bye next week. But every team that's played the Lions, like the following week, has just gotten waxed. They say it's like they play so physical. Like that's kind of the working theory is that they like wear a team out for the following week. Because, I mean, it happened again. The Seahawks got absolutely smoked by the Giants. There was not one point. I looked at my son. We were watching the game, and like 10 minutes in, I was like, dude, the Giants are dog walking the Seahawks, because they had like a 10-minute drive where they had the fumble at the one that gets run back, and they just went right back down the field and drove again. I was like, this is not looking good here for the Kenneth Walker bags.
Yeah, no Neighbors too, and no Singletary. I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but they were without some pieces as well as far as the Giants. Yeah, so give me the runbacks, the potential runbacks here. Rich, you want to sell me? I think Ferguson's the most popular piece. Of course, Lamb is great, but you got to pay for him. It looks like Dowdle is separating himself here in this backfield for Dallas.
I ain't playing Dowdle against the Lions, man.
Yeah, he's going to get beat up, is what you're saying.
I mean, we just don't play running backs against the Lions. I know Kenneth Walker got there on Monday night 2 weeks ago, but Kenneth Walker's a special entity. Like some those runs that Kenneth Walker had in that Lions game, like other humans aren't. There are very few running backs that could have those runs. So like, you know, he got like suplexed in that game for a run. Do you remember? And like got up and like, right, like, and he had that 21-yard touchdown where he like reverse field. Like Rico Dowdle's not doing any of that against the Lions. So I'm not going to play Rico Dowdle in this game, but it's nice to see Rico Dowdle. If you got him in your season-long leagues, like you feel pretty good about maybe having a guy that's going to be a value draft pick. But Lamb for me is the guy that I think I do kind of want to pay for on the slate on DraftKings, because you get the full PPR run out where he can kind of catch just a bunch of passes, right? Like this could be, and we've said this a couple of times, but like remember at this point last year, CeeDee Lamb actually has more yards and touchdowns than he had at this point last year. Now, everyone's disappointed because they used the second pick on him in drafts or the first or third, but like
it's all relative.
He's actually ahead of where he was last year. And then we had this run out. I still think the targets are going to find him. The Cowboys are still throwing at a high rate. The Lions are facing 29.5 targets per game to wide receivers. That's the most in the NFL. Wide receivers have scored 64% of the fantasy points against the Lions. That's the highest rate in the league. Lamb had 17 targets last time these teams played. We're not going to chase that box score or the 95-yard touchdown he had in that game. But I do think this is a game where Lamb definitely projects to push double-digit targets. And we've seen guys that play inside and out give the Lions trouble because they obviously have shored up their outside cornerback room this year. And it showed, like, these guys haven't been perfect. Terry and Arnold and Carlton Davis haven't been perfect players, but they were a lot better than what they put on the field outside a year ago at cornerback. And these guys that can move inside and out have actually given them the most trouble when you look at the big wide receiver games, the Cooper Kupps, the Chris Godwins of the world. And that's Lamb still. Like, Lamb is still a 50-50 player inside and out. So I definitely think Lamb is a guy that, even though he is expensive and he hasn't really gotten there, I kind of want to go back to him again this week.
I definitely don't mind Lamb, especially because at his salary, he's someone that you want to be ahead of, kind of like how we're still trying to pinpoint Tyreek Hill because he's going to kill us.
Chase was that way. Like,
yeah, exactly. They're guys who just, their ceilings kill you at 7K. So we just need to be ahead of it. And so I don't mind it. I do think Tolbert, though, and again, it's only Wednesday. I'm not sure how builds are going to shake out. If we spend up somewhere, maybe we need to instead pivot to Tolbert over Lamb. I do think Tolbert's live in any build, too.
Oh, yeah.
Just because, like, maybe it could be a third-year breakout. I understand he didn't do much before this, but he's still a player with third-round NFL draft capital, only 25 years old. We see third-year breakouts all the time. The runway has been set, led the team in targets last week, and it's just the fact that him and CeeDee Lamb are even rotating from the slot, and that's kind of where we're trying to pinpoint wide receivers against the Lions as well, allowing more than one additional point per game than the next closest team to enemy wide receivers from the slot in particular. So just the fact that CeeDee Lamb the last couple of games has only run 2 more routes than Tolbert from the slot, I think that you could get away with either depending on your build.
The optimal stuff I ran pre-show on DraftKings, the 2 most popular receivers, Jalen Tolbert is the most popular guy. And second, the news with Pittman coming out, Josh Downs is looking to be very popular this week. And we'll see the situation as far as quarterback. And I think right now we're projecting Richardson, but I'm not sure. That's another fluid situation there. By the way, I was thinking about how do we pay off Lamb and Amon-Ra, like both those guys in the same lineup. And I think the first answer might be Radler. That might be
you're gonna have to do
that might be a way to get there.
QB. You're gonna have to do cheap QB, I think, if you want to do that, because we don't have the pay down running backs either. I guess we can see what happens with like the Colts situation, but the Titans have like pretty much nuked the run like every time that they've played too. So they're a tough team to run on. So I don't know if I'm gonna chase like the Sermon, even if Tyler Goodson is the backfield to himself. I guess if he has it to himself, we got to, but if Richardson plays, he doesn't throw to running back. So we don't have that run out last week where we had all those running back targets last week. Because that's how those guys got there last week. Sermon luck box and a touchdown at the end, but Sermon caught 6 passes. Like I definitely wasn't pinpointing that, coming in, but Flacco has thrown to running backs at a lot, like double the rate of Richardson. And Richardson's one of these guys. He's going to hang in the pocket. We talked about it. He wants to throw the football downfield, and those running backs don't get those targets.
And so far, the cheap running back has opened up at the end of the week, like Tyrone Tracy last week.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking,
and that's going to be, and if you play on FanDuel, it's probably going to be Chase Brown.
Oh yeah.
Even if you're stuck with Brown and Moss still plays,
you can play Brown.
Like he's still fine either way.
He's 5'4", right, on FanDuel.
Yeah, very cheap.
And against the Giants, like that's playable anyways. For his role's just been increasing every week anyways. Yeah.
I do want to talk about the tight ends, John. Feel free to touch on both, but I think especially Ferguson, if he's going to be one of the more popular plays this week. Is that good chalk. And Laporta, hasn't quite been the same guy as he was last year. Last year, he had several like monster games, so I think kind of sort of somewhat skewed his numbers. And I think he had a touchdown variance in his favor. You probably can tell me that better than I know. But I know he had that one game where he had like 200 yards, which is hard to repeat as well. But touch on the tight ends here.
Yeah, it was, speaking of regression coming into the year, Laporta was one that stood out the most. I believe it was, this is easier when I have to say it 5 times during the offseason and come in week 1 and say it. But I believe the stat was out of 123 players with at least 10 red zone targets, Laporta led all of them with converting 40% of those red zone targets into touchdowns. Also, double-digit touchdowns as a rookie. That alone, unsustainable. So his touchdown regression is something we saw coming. Pinpointing regression, as we always say on the show, it's just a little bit tough in season, so maybe it recalibrates with multi-touchdowns in this game. But I didn't realize that spinning up for him, as you said, that right now he's being spit out and optimizers at the chalk. Like, if that's the case, then of course I'm saving the extra 700 to 1,000 on both sites and playing Tucker Kraft instead as an every down role. Jake Ferguson, though, also, I think he's just trending towards someone who's matchup proof regardless of what happens. Now, even the past couple of games, he has just 2 more targets than CeeDee Lamb since he's returned from injury the last 3 weeks. So, yeah, I like Ferguson. I think I like Ferguson more than Laporta as well. But I think I prefer Tucker Kraft to all of them.
Anything you want to add on that, Rich?
No, I mean, I think that like brass tacks, I just can't see a lot of games like for the rest of the season where like Tolbert out targets both Ferguson and Lamb. Like, sure. I just don't see that being like something that's going to happen regularly. So I don't want to chase it either. Okay.
Last game before we go position by position. We'll talk about that in just a second. Before we do that, do want to shout out Splash Sports. Splash Sports is raising the game with their brand new Quick Picks contest, giving you a chance to win up to 12 times your entry. Just pick more or less on any snack category. Build your entry using at least 2 selections. Splash Sports is now available in 34 states. The ultimate platform for peer-to-peer fantasy and betting contest. Challenge the RotoGrinders experts at splashsports.com/RotoGrinders. We also have a promo code for you. That is ROTO10. ROTO10 gets you $10 credit when you join your first contest. Also, speaking of contests, do want to shout out the RotoGrinders Listener League. Superdog. I think that's Superdog. SOUPERDG. That seems like Superdog. Let's shout out Superdog. Superdog won a month free of RotoGrinders Premium. Took down the Week 5 contest. Now you can join the Week 6 contest, the Listener League, play along with myself, all the favorites here at RG. And again, if you take that down, it's a free contest to join. It's in the description. There's limited spots. Get yourself a month free of RotoGrinders Premium. So do check that out. All right.
Did he have Burrow doubles? Did he take down the listener contest with that?
I will have to pull it up. Give me a second. I'll pull it up.
Burrow doubles and Zay Flowers, who we also talked about last week, because there's only one place the Ravens go. Well, outside of using all 3 tight ends, but Mark Andrews the least. There's only one place Lamar Jackson loves to go when they have to throw the ball. So that was pretty a wise stat going on by everyone.
Yeah, I'm imagining that's probably what this person had, but
it probably was. Yeah,
I'm going to pull it up there because that
was
smashed last week.
It was a really fun week, though. Like we said, lots of points, but also by the time the afternoon slate came around, 6 quarterbacks had gotten the bonus on DraftKings. So it was not the week to have PMR in your lineup because you were already fighting immensely uphill with all the chalk in the world in your stacks. That's the only reason I played more Colts Jaguars was because I wanted to show myself as many cards as possible, understanding that then maybe I could swap off and play more Cardinals passing or just get some late swaps going on.
It's a part of the game we don't talk about enough, but that's definitely
it's a Wednesday.
Something you need to pay attention to.
Yeah. There's nothing better when you love that 1 p.m. game that no one's really into, like Colts Jags, and because you get to see you can see the cards revealed, and if that stack hits, you love what you can alter your lineup with, or how you have to calibrate, the late swap, which no one utilizes. So.
Especially when 30% of the field is on every Packers player.
Yeah, I had a lot of PMR in the game. My lineups are kind of dead before the game's even started to some degree. All right. Speaking of points, Washington, Baltimore, 51.5 is the total. Baltimore, I believe that's the highest team total on the board at 29. They're almost a 7-point favorite here. Feels like, dealer's choice. Do they want to run on Washington? Do they want to pass on Washington? Whatever they want to do, they can do whatever they want, it seems like here. Lamar was obviously spectacular last week. Henry just keeps doing his thing as well. Mark Andrews Scott's. Was that this was Daigle? I think it was your stat, right? Andrews was the third best tight end of this team? I think that was your stat.
He was because Likely and Kolar scored touchdowns. Kolar had the big 50-yard catch. Andrews just, man, it's not. I don't know how it happens overnight at 29 years old, but he looked
fine though. Honestly, he should have had a touchdown. Lamar threw very few bad passes in that game, and Lamar even knew it when he let that one go. He ran a wheel route that was wide open. He caught the pass, but he had to dive for it. He would have walked in the end zone. I mean, he doesn't look like injured when he catches the ball. He just doesn't play. So
he's got fresh legs. He's not playing.
But when you look at his actual yards per target and stuff, it's actually pretty good. It's just he's not playing. You can't trust him. Likely's ran more routes than him 3 weeks in a row. So you can't have any faith in him. Like Daigle said, if you're playing the passing game, it's Zay Flowers and only Zay Flowers.
Not Bateman. He's not if you're running 150, you wouldn't play any Bateman.
He's not practicing today. I don't know how banged up he is, but yeah, I mean, listen, if you're telling me you're 150, I'll never push back and say you can't throw this dude in the lineup. But from an objective lens, we've seen now, anytime the Ravens have had dropbacks in a game, 3 games, he's had double-digit targets in every game. So he's the guy. And then you look at Washington, even with the last 2 weeks factored in, where they've actually stopped a few teams, or the opponents have stopped themselves, however you want to dissect it, they still are allowing the most points to wide receiver ones, even with the Amari Cooper game factored in. And they are allowing 6 touchdowns, lead targets are 28th in yards for them. So Zay Flowers, if we get the run out where the Ravens actually throw, he's the guy.
Did you confirm, John? That's where you want to go? Zay, I assume if you're on the passing game, if you need a pairing partner for Lamar,
he's the only one we talked about last week too, for anyone who wanted to play the Bengals side of the ball, just because now, even with last week's game, he had that odd run first approach in week 4, but around that one, he hasn't dipped below a 25% target share in the other 4 contests. I mean, he's just getting hammered targets. He's being used differently for more deep shots this year as well. So yeah, it's Zay Flowers. But again, the Ravens kind of dictate this game and do whatever they want. So if you want to go up to Derrick Henry as well, of course, by all means. We saw even last week with the Commanders, of course, that was the Browns offense. It's supposed to be set up to where Jerome Ford and everyone has success, even Deshaun Watson. No one gets there, even though Jerome Ford was still efficient. But beyond that, you could still run on the Commanders quite easily too. So yeah, of course. Derrick Henry, if you want to spend up, Lamar Jackson. That's why it's more interesting from the Ravens side of the ball, because you have to pick one. If you want to get unique, it gets very expensive, but maybe it is Lamar with Derrick Henry. That was something we tinkered with last week as well. If you thought they just dominated the Bengals defense, I'm very much open to that idea too.
Yeah, we saw. I mean, it's the Ravens, depending on the game script, what they want to do offensively kind of through these first 5 weeks, because this is the risk you run whenever Derrick Henry's popular like he was going into last week, is you are still at the mercy of the game script with a guy like Derrick Henry. And we seen it in the second half of that game. He played 8 snaps. Justice Hill played 24 snaps because they needed to throw the football. to catch up. So you are still always at that mercy. And then everyone that played him got that 50-yard run and right after in overtime to kind of push him up there. He still didn't get the bonus, but it definitely smoothed out his total line in that game because he just didn't play in the second half of that game. So you are always at that mercy with Derrick Henry. And, we've played this game for years with Derrick Henry. We know who he is. You can get shadow realmed when he gets the 2 touchdowns and he goes for 150. But that's just what always makes it always so uneasy to play again. Like Dean, you brought up, like, you don't like playing quarterbacks that don't have the duality, right? Like that could be dual threat. And that's like the same box that Derrick Henry's in at running back. Like, you're always at the mercy of the game script. This guy doesn't score 2 touchdowns. He's not worth the price. And that's always the line you have to walk. So you have to say to yourself, like, all right, how do the Ravens, do they dominate this game? Do the Commanders put up a fight, right? Because while the Ravens are running the football, they're probably going to run it effectively. It just depends if they're behind or ahead.
So I do have that rule, but when you break that rule, and everybody else is aware, the time you break that rule, right, is massive home favorite with the biggest team total on the board against a defense that's vulnerable, right? So this is the time where you're supposed to play Henry. The 29-point team total and your 7-point favorites, like this is the time to unleash him, but everybody else sees the same thing. So ownership might reflect it. I imagine he's going to be at least somewhat popular if you have the salary. We do live in the world of a salary cap, but for sure, he's an awesome spend up, and he's a guy that could go for 150 and 2.
You can also just keep playing Lamar Jackson if you're going to spend that salary. You can't go wrong playing Lamar Jackson right now. He's the only quarterback that's been a top 10 scorer every single week this season.
So do we want to play Lamar or do we want to play Daniels? Daniels is getting up there in price, still a little bit cheaper than Lamar, but he's been spectacular. Should be chasing here, Rich. Also kind of, sort of, somewhat. I mean, if we were saying that, like, Flowers is the obvious pairing partner for Lamar, the obvious pairing partner for Daniels is Terry, right?
I mean, is he the guy that's showing in optimals too? Like, I guess his salary's gone up a little bit, but I feel like he's going to be immensely popular on the slate.
Yes. Yeah, he looks like the third receiver. Like I didn't run pairings, to be clear. I'm not running stats.
Base, because I feel like he's just, it's a spot where they're probably gonna have to throw. The Ravens have shown us a couple spots where it's like this defense looks like it's turning the corner and they're playing well for sections of games, but they just, like, the totality of their stats, like, guys just keep getting there against them, in the passing game. Like, they just keep giving up a truckload of passing stats weekly. I mean, they're now 31st in fantasy points per target allowed to wide receivers, 30th in yards per target, 28th in yards per catch, 28th in touchdown rate allowed to wide receivers. And the Commanders are funneling this thing through one guy largely. So, I mean, I feel like he's going to be really popular. Great. Well, how do we miss this too? This is crab cakes and football. Maryland is back, baby. Maryland football.
Shout out.
There's probably never been a Ravens Washington football game that's actually mattered. It's since the Ravens have come back. Like, this is it.
Although I will say the Old Bay on shrimp, like, it's fine, but it's probably too excessive. Like, it's not necessary.
Yeah, crab cakes and football. This is the game.
I remember I went to a Baltimore Orioles game many years ago, and, like, you have the concessions people kind of selling stuff outside. They were selling crab cakes outside. Like, it's real. It's not just they don't just put it in the brochure. Some hot dogs are pretty much a staple anywhere, right? And there were just people just selling water and crab cakes. Like, oh, okay, this is interesting. All right. So, is there any fringe? We talked about the Bateman. Don't feel great about that. Do we feel anything as far as De'Ami Brown or McCaffrey or Noah Brown, any Brown, Zacchaeus? Do we feel any sort of confidence, or just TV darts? That's that.
I absolutely hate that there are athletic tight ends on this slate, because I don't think Ertz is bad. The Ravens now have allowed 3 top 12 performances. The issue is those 3 top 12 performances were the exact opposite profiles of Zach Ertz and Dalton Kincaid, Brock Bowers, and Jake Ferguson, just all 3 athletic dogs. So maybe it's not the case, but honestly, it's as far as you can get, especially because, like, where you beat the Commanders, they've allowed the 4th most points to receivers from the slot, and you ain't playing Luke McCaffrey. Like, you ain't playing De'Ami Brown. It's only Terry McLaurin and Zach Ertz if you need to save some salary.
We got to make a stack in this game, Rich. We starting with Daniels, we starting with Lamar.
I want to play Lamar. I think he's playing too good right now. I think Lamar is he's playing better football than last year when he kind of backdoored him to the MVP by default. I think he's been the best quarterback in the NFL so far.
Did you guys see the clip of Lamar when the lady walked up to him in a restaurant?
It was great.
That was
awesome.
Spectacular. He talked about it in like a press conference today. It was really, really good. It's worth seeking out. But she was talking smack on behalf of. Yeah, I like him. All right. Anything else here as far as?
Because I just feel even either game script you get, Lamar's fine. Because like if they're running the RPO stuff, he's going to get there. If they have to throw, he's clearly getting there. Like last week, I feel like he's just I just feel cozy putting Lamar Jackson in my lineup.
And I know last week was supposed to be the first of 2 tests for the Commanders offense, and they were great. But also we're now seeing the Browns have the propensity to leak some very big plays. I think this is the real litmus test here. And Rich kind of said even how the Ravens defense has been up and down. They've shown up some spots. Joe Burrow had his way. But for this one, like even Jaden Daniels, you're not running on the Ravens. And that's kind of why we played Jaden Daniels in fantasy. Josh Allen even had only 21 rushing yards against them. No running back has reached 50 yards against them. So even like we think we could get excited and maybe Brian Robinson luck boxes a touchdown, but you're just not playing any running back against Baltimore until further notice. And so Jaden Daniels has to get it done through the air.
But do we think this run game is creative enough? Like, is this like how the Ravens like were, right? Like they're I don't want to say that they're matchup proof, but like this is a really good running team and it's a good running scheme. So it could be successful in some of these tougher matchups, right?
Man. Yeah.
I mean, the problem is they're playing all these guys. Brian Robinson's hurt. He's probably not going to practice all week. And we saw there was a clear jip. Like that game, he didn't play in the second half of that game at all. They're probably going to work McNichols in a little bit. Eckler's banged up. So like, that's the tough part is like but I think as a unit combined with Jaden Daniels, I feel like pretty strongly, like they're going to at least have some success running the football.
That's not how I was viewing it, but that does make me a little more confident in wanting to play the Ravens side because that's kind of.
I mean, the Commanders have given us no reason to not believe in their offense at this point, and I know, and like last week, it's the Browns was like kind of like the first real test that they had, and the Browns give them a little bit more resistance than some of the other teams have, but like they still just put up 24 in the first half.
They ran for 211 yards. Yeah,
like, I mean. This offense looks legitimately good. It's efficient. Like they have a quarterback that is running the system properly. I kind of feel pretty decent about the Commanders just because the Ravens also really haven't played very well defensively for the bulk of the season.
Lamar, Flowers, and McLaurin like feels like kind of a popular threesome, which kind of sort of makes sense to go in this conversation. I was trying to like think of it.
I mean, you can play Lamar and Henry. That's we talked about a couple weeks ago. Yeah. Like if you want to get unique, you can, because like if you did that in the Bills week, like you got all the touchdowns.
You get all the touchdowns. Yeah.
Because he's going to throw. The thing about the Ravens is they throw these rando touchdowns. Like Nelson Aguilar could have a touchdown. And you're like, what the hell? You're like Charlie Collar last week likely has his 2 TD game. Like when they throw touchdowns, I mean, like everyone kind of gets involved. A couple weeks ago, Bateman had a touchdown. Like it's
okay. Let's move on. Let's run it back and talk about our favorite quarterbacks we've not yet discussed. Favorite running backs, receivers, as far as outside of the 3 main games. Quarterback, I think we have to have this conversation. We just learned a few hours ago that Spencer Rattler is going to be starting this week for New Orleans. Producer TJ, who's here sometimes, he's not here this week. He's a New Orleans fan, and he was touting Rattler to us in our DMs. He's a big fan. He was saying the fan base likes him. Rookie out of, I think, South Carolina.
He was at Oklahoma. It's who Caleb replaced.
He was, and before he transferred, he was argued as the number 1 overall pick. Like he was in the conversation, and then
he was a hot Debbie guy.
The Netflix show and some other things that happened at South Carolina, like showed that he had some major character and off-field concerns, so he got pushed down.
So he's regressed. All right, but he's 4K, and he really. I guess the big question is like big picture, and we don't fully know this on a Wednesday, right? We don't fully know like how much do we need that salary savings, but it's sort of there if you need it. And I was talking about like I'm on Raw and CeeLam. If you want to, double dip in the 2 prime receivers in the same game, of course you're not going to have the quarterback attached to it. But what do we need out of Rattler as the other? Like, what do we need to be okay with it? If we get like 18 points, is that fine? Is that what will we take 18? I think we'd happily take 18. I think.
Oh God, 18? Yeah, 18 we would love.
I'm going too high with 18, aren't I? What is he projected at? Projections are tricky too. And we talked about this, Rich. He ran a lot in college. but he didn't run for any yards in college. Now, is that in part?
He took a lot of sacks.
You lose yards for sacks, right?
Yeah, in college you do. Yeah, this dude took a lot of sacks. He actually was sacked because what's funny is the situation he's walking into. We'll see if Cesar Ruiz is back, but we know Eric McCoy's not back. Lucas Patrick got banged up on Monday night. We'll see if he plays. So the Saints could be down 3 offensive line starters. They've just this offense has fallen apart since this offensive line's been banged up. Like it died after week 2. Once McCoy left that game in week 3 against the Eagles, like this offense just hasn't been the same. And then Ruiz hasn't played the last 2 weeks. And at South Carolina, so Rattler will be familiar. He was the most pressured quarterback in this draft class. And so he'll be used to this, but he also took the most sacks on pressures in this draft class. So he was awful in the preseason. People said that like he only completed 52% of his passes in the preseason, like 5.3 yards per pass attempt. Like people were like, yeah, we love him. But I just think people hate Derek Carr. So like
during the preseason, he was under pressure on 16 dropbacks. He averaged 1.1 yards per attempt. And we know Todd Bowles is going to send the house.
Oh God, dude.
Every single time. So I'm
and his name was Rattler, by the way. His name was Rattler.
Rattler. Yeah.
Like,
I'm very worried. I'm very
Homer
worried.
Bailey being a pitcher. I don't like.
He's going to be a snake in lineups. Is really what he is.
Also, the Bucks are
2-6.
The Bucks are 2-6 on DK.
We're gonna have a showdown. The Millie Maker's gonna have a showdown for sure.
2.6K for the Bucks just seem like they're gonna be a pretty popular defense. They're probably gonna blitz the heck out of them. But
that's the other thing last week. Not even did Kraft get there. Broncos D with the 100-yard touchdown.
Dude, it's just the chalk defense shit. God, I hate it when it happens. It was a free square, I get it, but I hate it when it happens, man.
Well, that game is going to be totally different. Bauer scores that 60-yard touchdown the first drive. The Raiders are about to go up 2 scores, and then Minshew just the absolute terrible
14-point swing.
Play.
Yeah,
absolute terrible Minshew type play.
Minshew relegated to a bench. Aiden O'Connell, if you guys missed it, expected to play as the starter for the Raiders. I don't think it's going to make a difference, but whatever. Other quarterbacks, I just wanted to get the Rattler stuff out there because I think, if I'm running a certain number of lineups, I'm going to have some. I don't know what my expectations are.
You got to at least F around and find out the diagram.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, you know what you're getting into. You bought the ticket, and if it's a disaster, so be it. But, I'm probably going to – again, it's like we'll see what we need salary-wise on Sunday. But if I need some salary, I'm willing to hold my nose and, see if it happens. Other quarterbacks we've not yet mentioned, John, who do you have on the board quarterback-wise?
Let's just go to the Colts-Titans game. And I'm going to come at it from a different angle because on the surface – the vibes are bad for the Colts. Like the total's coming down. There's no Michael Pittman. There's cluster injuries on defense. So that's also makes Will Levis an interesting play. But I may end up pushing back against the market, especially in larger field, because the Titans, like wherever you look, they have the best advanced metrics in terms of passing the ball across the board. But they've also only faced Caleb Williams in his debut, Aaron Rodgers, Malik Willis, and Tyler Huntley. Whereas Joe Flacco has now been the QB 14 in 3 quarters and the QB 4 last week with, if you include the Browns playoff game, 6 consecutive 300-yard starts. I know Michael Pittman's absence on the surface seems bad. I kind of think if you were to create a 3-wide set in the lab, it would involve Alec Pierce and A.D. Mitchell for Joe Flacco, where you can just throw prayer balls up constantly. So I think I may be willing to take on the market and say, I kind of like Joe Flacco doubles in this game.
The problem is Flacco's not going to play.
He's not going to play. Yeah, I don't think
it's yeah.
We don't know
it sounds great in theory. I think we all want it to happen. And this is why so many teams didn't sign Flacco. Because from a PR stance, this is what you have to deal with. When you have a young quarterback like Anthony Richardson, and you have a veteran quarterback that's capable of playing. It's why the Browns didn't bring him back, right? Because he played well, and they couldn't deal with hey, just put Flacco in. Because now if Anthony Richardson plays bad, or if he plays like he did to start the season, the first thing Shane Steichen's going to get asked after the game, will you go back to Joe Flacco? And it's why he hung around. This is from a PR stance. It's a nightmare, man. So we'll see what happens, but it looks like we're trending right now that Richardson's going to play.
All right. I was coming at it from.
But yeah, I think if we do get Flacco, that tune will change. I think because I think the Colts receivers in general, people are interested in Downs. They're interested in Mitchell. They're interested in Pierce, even though the matchup maybe looks sketchy on the surface. But all those guys are cheap. Everyone's just scared about the Richardson factor because you don't know if he's like AD Mitchell is like the biggest example, right? Like he's in like ESPN's open score. He's good. He's good on like the fantasy points, separation stat that they have. What do they call it? ASS.
Yeah.
But like he's 30% of his targets have been uncatchable. Like, so like that's the game we play with the Colts guys. Like you want to play these cheap guys, like even Downs splits with Flacco and Richardson are night and day. So, I mean, Downs has a 17% inaccurate target rate from Richardson, 5% from Flacco. Like if we get Flacco, then those guys all become more interesting than how we are treating it on a Wednesday night where it's like, all right, Richardson's probably going to come back.
Who's on your list, Rich? Really cheap Justin Fields is there on the turf there in Vegas. That just feels like how much pushback and forth there's going to be in that game is my concern. And speaking of pushback, you talk about vibes. Vibes obviously are terrible in Cleveland. I think if there's
that's why we couldn't get to Watson last week, man.
Yeah.
I just think Hurts and Philly just absolutely throttles Cleveland this week, and I like that Philly. They're going to get everybody back. We're assuming everybody's coming back, even though Lyman's coming back. They're coming back from the bye. And Cleveland, you got to assume that locker room's a mess. Like if you're blocking for Watson, they're all professionals, but they're still probably like, what? They know it's a clown show.
No,
and
the good news is the guys blocking for Watson right now probably aren't professionals. Like they'll probably be back on the streets very soon too, because that offensive line is also an absolute mess.
It's a
They're
disaster,
acting like
man.
professionals.
It's an all-time bad vibes team. This current Browns team is all-time bad vibes team. Like the body language, every player just looks like they don't want to be out there, man, at this point. And they're probably not going to have Denzel Ward. I will get to AJ Brown when we get there. The only other quarterback that I mentioned, because I want to play Lamar. I want to mix in Lamar. I want to mix in some Jaden Daniels. All the games we talked about are basically my quarterback pool. But then we'll keep an eye on just kind of where the field's going to do with Kirk Cousins, just because, I mean, it's this Panthers defense. Like they lost Jadeveon Clowney last week too. Like they just lose first of all, they weren't even good to begin with. And they just keep losing a guy a week. Like every week they lose a starter, and someone was starting on that team that was already bad. It's like the guy behind them's not even good. It's just this defense just isn't good. And I actually want to play Bijan more than I want to play. That's why I want to keep an eye on this game to see if like the passing game, like if London and Cousins get popular, or even Mooney. But everyone gets there against the Panthers. Like literally everyone. I mean, just pick a guy. Pick a guy they've gotten there. Except for what? The Minshew is the only one.
London, by the way, the fourth most popular receiver I'm seeing, and Bijan the most popular running back that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So
just every Falcon. Just play every Falcon.
Yeah, you're going to see the Falcons are probably going to be popular. John, do you have anyone else as far as quarterback, or shall we just move on?
No, we can move on. I think we talked about everyone in my pool.
By the way, does Chubb want to come back to this nonsense in Cleveland? Like he's like, lifting, whatever he's doing his squats, but like his motivation is like self-motivation, right?
Yeah.
But like it's nonsense. Just like
he's got something to prove, man. He's got because he's also a free agent. So like,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. In the Carolina situation, also with their rookie running backs, like, are they going to bring him back? I guess they are, but to what? And that's probably not their biggest issue running back right now. If you're going to like put a list as far as their issues,
and we're probably like, I think if you have Deontay Johnson, who I think is playable on the slate, like you probably should be trying to move him through these bye weeks, because I think we're pretty close to getting Bryce Young back at some point too.
Oof.
There's just no reason to not run him back out.
Yeah.
Like
yeah. What's the point?
Dalton's gotten progressively worse every game.
Yeah, send Dalton to Cleveland. Do they just hate Jameis in Cleveland? Like, I remember Jameis being pretty good.
There's multiple.
Maybe I'm wrong.
About that. First of all, yes, everyone's perception of Jameis is wrong. Like Jameis is terrible, and he's been terrible for like a while. But this has to be from higher up. Like, there's like, because how do you not even pull him last week? Because you're down 24-3 at the half. You figure, hey, it's the Commanders. We're down 24-3 half. Let's just put Jameis in and see if we can do something stupid, right? And they still didn't. Like they cut their teeth he was still going out there when the game was completely dead in the fourth quarter, was still going out there. It has to be from higher up that like we can't, like but the public optics are fully on board. Like everyone has realized looking outside in, hey, this dude sucks. It's not going to get better. If you were to, like, we've all admitted, like, that was the worst thing. It's probably the worst thing an organization's ever done. So, but like, you got to move on now. You have to.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like it's going to get turned around anytime soon or possibly ever. All right. Tough scenes there for Cleveland and their fan base all around. Okay. Running backs, Daigle, what do we have as far as RBs that we've not yet discussed?
Just a couple, because Bijan Robinson, obviously, everyone's going to, again, like Rich said, I hope everyone tries to pivot to the passing game. I'm glad we got 500 yards last week, because that finally sets us up in a good spot where maybe people think that's sustainable. So I can happily lean on Bijan against this Panthers defense. We'll see what happens. The only other one, honestly, on my list, because I'm probably playing running backs that we talked about from the 3 games too, is Tony Pollard, who, again, it's as simple as we play running back against the Colts, but also he's lapping Tajay Spears in the most important part of the field. 9 red zone carries to Tajay Spears 2. He's the only running back for the Titans to touch the ball inside the 5-yard line. Tajay Spears' only rushing touchdown this year was from a handoff from Tony Pollard. Like, so if we have to choose one, I think it's definitely Pollard here. That's where I'm going on the Titans side of the ball.
Rich?
No, I pretty much Bijan's the only other guy outside of the games that I really had, on my list. I think getting Caleb McGarry back was huge. I mean, you look at Bijan when McGarry's on the field, 43% success rate, 5 yards per carry, 14% explosive run rate. He still had a significant touch edge over Tyler Algier last week. So I mean, against the Panthers, like, this just feels like a spot. Panthers already allowing a league high 22.9 rushing points per game to backfields. They led the league, or was worse than the league in that category last year. They've already allowed 10 touchdowns to running backs. The only time they haven't allowed a top 6 scoring running back in a week was the Raiders. The Fighting Antonio Pierces is what I'm going to start referring to them as.
Barkley feels like an interesting spend up to be different. If you like the Philly side, I like the Philly side. And I don't know how. I think he's going to be less owned than Henry. He's cheaper than Henry, and Henry just kind of, like, you could tell a better story, I think, with Henry. But I like that as a tournament.
No problem.
Is Najee Harris just terrible? What's the deal?
Yeah, they're another team though. They've lost 3 offensive linemen. Like,
yeah,
an offensive line already is like a weak league position. If you have one bad offensive lineman, a set of 5, it can ruin a play. The Steelers are now 3 in the bag. Like, and this is an ongoing problem for the NFL. And it's been since they added games. These offensive line injuries, man, like, have been absolutely devastating this year. I know we all talk about the fantasy stars that have been out this year, but so many offensive lines have just been ripped apart at the start of the season.
It's a good thing they're floating an 18th game already. Like, let's get more money. Let's have an 18th game. Why not? Sure. And
these offensive linemen just don't have an edge versus defensive linemen right now. Like, I honestly think outside of NBA players, NFL defensive linemen and edge rushers may be the best athletes, like, in sports right now. Like, the fact, did you see that dude from the Saints get that interception? That dude looked like
what
a
demon.
Moment.
Like, what a moment.
Dude, like, these athletes, these big men, like, these aren't Gilbert Brown, like a guy, just a fat dude taking up space anymore. Like, these dudes are all amazing athletes for their size. Like,
he knew the spotlight was on him.
That?
Thick 6. Well, you got to score a touchdown.
He didn't score, but
but
the thick pick.
I mean, there was a 0 chance of him taking a knee in that moment. He just took off sprinting.
And let him do that. Let him take off. Just don't fumble.
He gained 25 extra yards of field. So yeah, of course, he did great.
That was spectacular.
All right, it's down bad, man. Some of these teams, like, these run games, are down bad. I mean, look at the Breece Hall situation too, man. Like, I mean, he's literally him and Tony Pollard too. Like, they're averaging negative yards before contact. Like,
let them hold. Can we just let offensive linemen hold? Can we just change that rule? Let them hold.
Get it to COVID here. Just let it happen.
I mean, they kind of let them hold as is. There's a certain degree of hold they let them get away with, right? Let them hold a little bit more, incrementally.
But yeah, if you're on FanDuel, obviously Chase Brown is playable.
Yes.
And probably, depending what we get from the Devin Singletary news, like, one of those guys could end up being playable too. Like, you can go back to Tyrone Tracy if Singletary's out, because the Bengals also haven't stopped the run.
Man, that FanDuel, that might be a slate where like you have to hold those spots.
That game changes everything on that slate because T. Higgins looks underpriced. You've got the 2 running back situation where both running cheap. Potentially, maybe Neighbors coming back. But if Neighbors doesn't come back, the Giants receivers, because the Bengals haven't stopped anybody. Daniel Jones, I think, is even playable in that game.
He's been kind of good of late. Like,
for fantasy, he's been solid. So like that game definitely being on the slate definitely changes FanDuel if you're playing over there versus DraftKings.
Yeah, just looking at the prices. Yeah, Moss, like we said, he's did not practice on Wednesday. Brown is 5'4". Singletary, I don't think he practiced on Wednesday. Tracy's 5'8". Gray is 4'7". Gray did start that game, but Singletary, Tracy definitely took over the role there. I believe it was after a great fumble, if I'm not mistaken. But okay, let's talk about receivers. Rich, open it up as far as receivers we've not yet discussed.
I mean, we hinted about guys like London. I brought up Deontay. It's good. AJ Brown is the one guy that like I'm looking at the top. It looks like the Browns are not going to have Denzel Ward. We had a hamstring injury last game. They're already 21st in points allowed to opposing wide receiver 1 targets. And we know that Jim Schwartz plays a ton of man coverage. And since joining the Eagles, AJ Brown's been targeted on 38% of his routes against man coverage. 3.5 yards per route run against man coverage. Only CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson better than that. We actually didn't even talk about that with Lamb too. Obviously the Lions play a ton of man coverage with him. And then the other guy I'll talk about, and it's a bummer that the Saints situation might kind of nuke this, but Chris Godwin looks really good. So the NFL has very few player rivalries anymore. Like we used to have Jerry Rice and Deanna. We have one this week. The Lattimore-Mike Evans feud is back on. Well, Marshawn Lattimore has gotten the better of that feud historically. Chris Godwin has been the benefactor of this. He has run 306 pass routes with Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore on the field at the same time. On those plays, he's been targeted on 24% of his routes. Mike Evans, 15%. He's got 27% of the team targets. Mike Evans, 16%. Also, New Orleans just allowed the ghost of Juju Smith-Schuster to have 116 yards out of the slot against them last week. This whole thing with like the offensive line and Rattler could just maybe make this a dumb game. But yeah, on paper, Chris Godwin looks to be in an ideal spot. I got one more gross one, but I'll see if Daigle. I want to take them all before I'll give Daigle a few.
It's not relevant for our slate, but I'm just curious, Daigle, how much did you have to discuss Juju in your 14-team, 16-team questions? In your team? People want to talk about Juju, right?
Having done this a while, I know what to expect. There is nothing worse than having to talk about a player blowing up in a primetime game, because that's the one game that everyone watches, so it's polarized. So like now people want to drop Xavier Worthy for Juju. People want to drop just everyone for Juju the rest of the season. And so it just takes a level head to assess all those things. I said Tolbert over Juju. How do you feel about that? Because it is a coin toss on waivers.
I'm Tolbert as well.
Okay, good. I'm Tolbert too. But people freak out about that. But again, it was Juju's most yards since December 2018. Like, how sustainable really is that kind of production? Plus again, like Rich said, which is why Chris Godwin was on my list, the Saints are allowing they're just giving it up into the slot, including Juju last week, over 60 receiving yards there. So yeah.
I mean, I would have got 14 yards on the last Juju catch. I would have got you 14 to 16 on that.
You would have went down like Lockett, though. Once anybody's even close to your vicinity, you got to go down.
Oh, yeah, he did it again last week. It was so good. Did you see it?
He very much, I respect it. Like, I don't want to. He's playing the long game. He's playing the long game.
He had like an open field run and like cut it back, and then it was just like, laid down.
Daigle, who is the best receiver you're taking Juju over? I'm curious. Like, you might have a list in front of you. I don't know. Do you have a power rankings? Like, who's like the best name that you would take Juju over? Do you have that on top of your head?
What do you mean, on waiver wires or what?
Yeah. As far as if your rankings, rest of season, waiver, like this guy or that guy. You mentioned Tolbert. You'll take Tolbert over him. Like, who's the guy that's like not as good? Who's that guy? I'm just curious what he lands for you.
How about Keon Coleman?
That's a good name.
That's a good name. I would take Juju over Keon Coleman, and I know some people would disagree, but I think we saw Trey Tucker. Oh, I think I'm in the minority that I don't think Devontae Adams gets traded. So
really,
again, trades don't happen mid-season. We're let down every year, and I don't know why. Whenever that should be the constant, that just you should assume no trade happens.
This situation feels different, but I agree with your general thought.
Sure.
Like if you're going to bet trade or no trade, no trade wins out. Like
no trade
of the time.
No trade is minus. It's definitely the favorite. Yeah.
And this is the Raiders organization, which is like, they don't all like, they hired Antonio Pierce. Like clearly they're not in the right frame of mind. Like they might just be like, we're only taking a 2, even though we know nobody's offering a 2. Like
Pierce said they had a good conversation. He's like, I don't know if you guys, he's like, we had a good conversation, like kind of implying like whatever was going on is kind of squashed, but also it appears he's not playing this week again. I don't know. We'll see. Stay tuned.
I know Devontae Adams is like talking behind the scenes too, as if he's already been traded to the Jets, because he obviously wants to play with Aaron Rodgers. But we'll see.
So like, I'm from the outside of Cleveland, and I watched this happen with LeBron. When LeBron came back the second time, he just ran the team, and like Aaron Rodgers is just clearly running the Jets right now.
It's Favre Vikings as well, as that's what happened.
But if I may, 30-year-old LeBron was like one of the best players in the league still. And Aaron Rodgers has no right. But I'm saying like LeBron actually, if somebody has a right to run the team, that LeBron in that year had a right. And this version of Aaron Rodgers probably shouldn't be running the team.
Right. Also,
you're not building your future around that.
LeBron was good. Let's start there.
That's
Aaron Rodgers. Yes. Aaron Rodgers very questionable right now at this stage of his career.
Yeah. Like I would let if I was the owner, LeBron, what do you want to do? You want to come in here at 30? Yes, let's do it. Whatever you want.
I got one more real gross guy.
I got a couple too. Hold on. Let me see if I can name them, because we got sidetracked. I don't think I'm going to get to them because my guys aren't that gross, but the only other 2 are Deontay Johnson. If you look at basically
I had him,
every expected point model, he's just buried in them because he's the only player in the league with double-digit red zone targets, but still just has 1 touchdown in the season. The first 2 games, remember, in the 3 games he played with Andy Dalton, over 30% of the team's targets. So considering he was benched, don't worry about that 18% target share from last week. Just play Deontay Johnson in a softer spot, although the defense has obviously been pretty good in Atlanta. And then depending on what shakes out, what game script, we're going to start projecting for the Colts Titans. The only other one I have is DeAndre Hopkins, because
that was my gross one.
Okay, good.
Gross one.
I don't even think it's gross, honestly. Like, we saw the ramp up happen from the ankle sprain or the knee injury, whatever it was from the preseason. That started happening the last couple of weeks. He maxed out a season high 60% route rate before the bye in that game. And then in the last 2 games, because the ramp up started happening behind the scenes, he lapped Calvin Ridley, 21.5% target share to Calvin Ridley's 12.5% target share. I think, and this is how I had it projected in the preseason, so I may be biased, I think DeAndre Hopkins is the better play than Calvin Ridley outright. Like, I think he just outscores Calvin Ridley the rest of the way. So I like Hopkins a lot in that game.
Yeah, I mean, Ridley's another one of these players, like the types of targets he's getting just are going to be so volatile, and especially from Will Levis, because they've largely, a lot of them haven't been catchable. But you do look at DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, his splits already right now, even on the limited routes that he played before their bye, leads the team in targets against cover 3 to over 2 yards per out run. We know this every week. We talk about these guys against Gus Bradley, what they're going to do. Got there again at Brian Thomas last week. And then last year against cover 3, Levis targeted Hopkins on 26% of his routes against cover 3. Had 2 good games against the Colts as well. Kenny Moore, we'll see if he's back or not, but he's been out. Colts are just one of these teams. They're missing so many guys defensively that, I mean, they put 4 defensive linemen on IR, a bunch of bodies on the back end. So like, they're just really down bad in terms of injuries.
I think it helps that coming off bye as well, like when it rests Hopkins, he's one of those guys that probably used it. We're expecting Levis back, right? It's going to be Levis and not Rudolph, which I don't know if that's better or not for.
I think so.
For Hopkins.
I think it sounds like it. Yeah, I mean, I know Levis had a lot of boneheaded mistakes, but it's not as if Mason Rudolph entered that game and inspired any amount of confidence. Like, the offense was still very sluggish with him.
So no Collins. We're just going to ignore Houston. I know people are going to ask about this 3-3 receiver. Anybody have any thoughts?
It's the Patriots stuff, though, man. That's the part that. And Dell's not cheap,
right?
And Diggs isn't cheap. Like, neither. There's no. It's not like one of those guys are a value. I think Dell is over 6K on both sites, and Diggs is kind of in that like nebulous zone where like, what do you get? Like, you have to have kind of, yeah.
We've been saying this dating back to last year, how Diggs has been overpriced for 2 years, it seems like. But go ahead, John.
No, that's the point. You're saying it. Like, the thing we argued about with Diggs for the last month of the season last week is, can he reach a 7.4 salary at this point of his career? And even week 1, remember, he scored 2 touchdowns. That was his highest finish, and it was wide receiver 9. Like, I don't know if he has a top 5 ceiling, and at 7.4, I feel like you need it.
Is Xavier
because you got T. Higgins.
Kind of
I mean, that's where like what we're getting from T. Higgins.
Does anybody have a Xavier Hutchinson take? I'm sure you've all been asked about Xavier Hutchinson. I don't know much about him.
I mean, the problem is that just the amount of dropbacks that team's probably going to have, right? And, he still wasn't. He played more snaps than Dell, but didn't get more targets per route than Dell. It's hard to see him like really jumping those guys.
Okay.
I'm trying to stay in,
but he's clearly the next guy like in the lineup. Like, it's not Bob Woods.
I don't know. Has a cheap option even steered us correctly? We missed Darius Slayton last week. That's on me. That's usually
we didn't
my call.
know. And Wednesday.
That's true. Yeah,
you had it last year.
And Darius Slayton is your guy. That's your dude. You are the Darius Slayton.
There was a week when you hit on last year.
Yes, but we usually Rashid Shaheed and Darius Slayton, I'm good at calling. Well, this week, every week is Rashid Shaheed week, so it doesn't matter. But yes, we didn't have Darius Slayton, but that's the cheap guy that popped. Typically, though, we know what happens when following those guys. Like last week, even Jordan Whittington, I think, was the one, and he only got there on the last drive. Like, other than that, it looked ugly for 3 quarters.
Yeah. There's not much below 4K that I'm seeing, as of right now. Jalen Polk looks okay, possibly.
Yeah, it's a wild card third.
Yeah.
Like, he's been playing a lot the last 2 weeks. They throw him out there. I wish May was cheap. I wish May was in the Rattler zone because May can run around.
Yeah, 5K. We didn't really talk about that, but that's interesting.
May is mobile and like he'll do some dumb shit. Like he'll try to run over a linebacker. Like
we don't want that.
He's a wild card fan.
Okay,
I'll tell you what. May is going to be, I think, a lot more fun in his situation. The line sucks, but like he's going to chuck some stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe like May and Polk is not a completely bonkers 1 in 150 sort of pairing, and it's super super cheap. That is the future quarterback and the future number 1 receiver in New England. If they have their druthers, that's what they're mapping out, I think. Right.
Well, they'll probably still. I think like Polk is probably set up like long term to probably be like their 2 or something.
Yeah.
Like they're going to eventually use like a high capital on another wide receiver. But
that's the issue, is that I can really only get to Polk, and then I think it's still too early for them to ramp up Kendrick Bourne as a full-time player. So he'd be like a 2 out of 150 lineup kind of guy for me. But like Bourne last year was, remember, the wide receiver 27. He led the team in targets in through his 8 games before tearing his ACL. It's just that it seems like he's kind of on a slow progressive ramp up right now.
The other guy too, just to keep an eye on, because I didn't bring him up because he didn't practice today, but let's keep an eye on, is Jacoby Myers. He's getting a ton. That team can't run the football. And I know it's the Steelers and it's not a great matchup, but like they're going to have a ton of dropbacks in that game, and he's getting a lot of targets. So, and he's a proven good player. Like, it's not like we're telling you to like pick up, like Jacoby Myers is a solid football player, and he's getting he had 26% targets last week and 42% the week before. And these have been in tough matchups, Browns, Broncos, and then Steelers. He's a guy, if they do trade Devontae Adams, is probably going to be like an immediate value, like pretty quickly.
Downgrade a quarterback there with the AOC takeover from Minshew. It's hard to say, right?
It's the Spider-Man meme.
Yeah, I don't really know how to read that either. But we've seen Minshew have games where he throws for like 400 yards. We've seen that. I know AOC's got a big arm, but I don't know much about him beyond that. Anyways, let's talk about some tight ends before we do that. Do you want to mention Combo Light at RG? If you guys are not aware, it's our newest product. Gives you the power of simulation for a fraction of the price of some other tools. Now, Combo Light is less than $40. It's $39 and change. It includes our SimLabs lineup building tool, plus content from some of your favorite DFS analysts. Combo Light, it does not limit you just to one sport, not just NFL, but the 4 most popular: NFL, MLB, NBA right around the corner, PGA, basically year-round. Go ahead and check the links in the description for more information on that. Okay, who wants tight ends? We're giving it to John. What tight ends left standing do you want to talk about?
George Kittle's not on this slate, unfortunately, so I guess I have to talk about. I
good play though this week again.
Every week we talked about a lot of the guys we're going to play. The only other 2 that pop up, which honestly, if Zach Ertz in one of the most popular games is not getting any pub whatsoever, I'd be more interested in that. But the chat did mention Dalton Schultz. Maybe. It's only been 39 plays this year with Nico off the field, but Schultz has been targeted on 28% of those routes. It is the spider meme as well, with him pointed at Zach Ertz, with Ertz in the better game script too. But if you're looking at somewhere else, sure. And then I don't know if we're going to get him. Right now, I don't think we are. And game script probably won't be good for him either. But dude, the Saints want Taysom Hill to be something.
Yeah.
And without Spencer Rattler, like he's left early in 2 of 3 games now because they are trying to force the hell out of the ball to him. 6-4 and 6 touches in these 3 games. I just think we're going to see a lot of him this week if he's healthy.
He's got those ribs. I think they're fractured. It's probably a pain tolerance thing.
It was a different injury too. It was on the other side of his body, unfortunately.
I broke my ribs. I broke my ribs once, and I sneezed and I cried. I don't know how the hell these dudes are gonna play. Like Roethlisberger played that one whole season with he played like a month with broken ribs, where he just wore like a giant jacket. I remember it. But I swear to God, dude, I broke my ribs. I sneezed that night. I cried, dude. Like I was in so much pain.
There's no cure, right? You just got to deal with it.
No, yeah, you just take a shitload of the drugs, man.
How'd you break your ribs?
Playing football. Yeah.
There you go. It's a good way to do it. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if they certainly could use them.
Sleep.
Everything hurts.
You can't be comfortable. Everything's bad, man.
It sounds miserable.
Absolutely terrible. These guys that play football, man,
oh yeah. they're pretty impressive for sure. I love that call though, if he's available, and then you don't really know how available he is and that kind of thing. But yeah, if he gives it a go, I think it's a great call because they certainly can use him this week. You got anything else here, Rich? You got the scraps as far as tight ends. There wasn't much to take anyway.
No, these guys are all gross. I'm not really going to play these guys. I will say I'll keep an eye on Mike Gesicki mispractice. So if you're on FanDuel, air call, we might get just with a cheap ass.
If you base it just on this show, 5 guys are going to be played from that game.
You're just going to play on FanDuel this week?
It's a good game.
Going to play on FanDuel. I'll tell you what though, I've had a couple of sweats early this year, and it is absolutely tilting when those games end at 4:00 and you still have to wait on another game to finish. It is absolutely just the worst. It sucks. Week 1 and week 4, I had to live through those Sunday night games.
It's a different kind of sweat.
Levitan late swap to Najee Harris last week because he thought he was getting off chalk and ended up losing him $20K on FanDuel.
Who did he go away from?
I think it was Jordan Mason. I'd have to look again, but I think he was just literally trying to.
It had to be a 2 for 2, or was it a 1?
I think it was a 1v1.
Just just ate the salary.
Yeah, because the way he figured the guys ahead of him, he had to get a little different, and it just
he was blocked.
What's funny?
Harris being popular though, again, just because the optimals are always going to spit out a dude getting that kind of projectable workload. But like I said, their offensive line is so bad. I will just mention Kyle Pitts, but I'm going to mention him in the light of don't play Kyle Pitts.
Okay.
Don't take what happened. So he had a good box score, right? Everyone's be like, man, Kyle Pitts, 7 catches, 88 yards. Dude, they had 60 dropbacks. This is why things like target share exist. He only had a 14% target share. He was out targeted still by London, McLeod, and Mooney. So we're probably going to get 25 to 30 dropbacks against this Panthers team. That target share looks a lot different. And I won't push anyone back from playing anyone they want against the Panthers or playing any tight end they want for the hell of it. But that box score definitely does not signal Kyle Pitts is back.
Maybe that's what this segment should become. Who you shouldn't play.
I like that.
And then you give the rest of the board to everyone.
By the way, we kind of mentioned his name in passing, but is this a Bijan week? Are we finally gonna get the big Bijan week against Carolina?
You said he was the highest rostered running back, right?
Yeah, but he hasn't done anything this year.
He's gonna be the highest rostered running back. I feel differently.
Well, yeah,
dude. Everyone has smoked the Panthers.
They've in 2 games this year, they've allowed multiple running backs to score touchdowns.
And also Bijan is not in the same situation like Breece Hall, where Breece Hall has absolutely been DOA the last 2 weeks. like Bijan's bad games are still usable. Like he has double-digit PPR points in every game this year. Like, if that's the floor, like he's still okay.
And if
and
this
McGarry, like I said, those splits of McGarry.
And if this limitation was due to injury, he's had 10 days to rest as well. It's the nut spot.
Yeah. I mean, if he can't get hit here, I actually do like Breece Hall this week too. He's not on this slate, but I actually think Breece Hall is going to have a good game this week too. I think
it's
both
just an expectation
both the
thing
dead guys.
with Bijan. Like,
Bijan
was a top 5 pick in drafts, and like,
they both were.
He decided to score. Yeah,
they both aren't going to match ADP because of the other guys. Like, we thought those guys were going to be like 75% market share guys, and they're not.
Yeah.
So play the 2-game slate and just play Bijan and Breece and hope everyone hates them enough to not play them.
All right, we're gonna bring in. I think Rob's probably hanging out here in the green room in just a second. Before we
got an hour 35 of football.
Yeah, we gave you guys an hour and 30. This is the end of the football conversation. Well, before I say that, tell the people. You guys know
it's crab cakes and football.
That's what we do. Rich, tell the people where you do the things you do. Tell them about Sharp Football Analysis.
Yeah, Sharp Football Analysis, writing up the worksheet. Go check that stuff out.
John?
I got all my plugs at the top, but I will say you should, if you've never stuck around for the movie conversation, Horizontal Tees, you should stick around this week. Just this one time, even pause it, go do your errands if you're not watching live, and then come back later and just see if you enjoy it, because Tiptoes is as interesting as you could possibly be.
Interesting is an interesting way to describe it. I know that Rich is super excited to talk about Tiptoes. Do we have, let's see, I'm trying to see if we're bringing in, here it is. I imagine Rob is also super excited to talk about Tiptoes.
There's things to say. I do like the broken rib conversation. Do you guys know that Peter Overzet broke my ribs?
Oh, really?
No.
Really?
Why? How?
Do you remember when we did the Royal Rumble thing like 2 years ago? Daigle, you were a part of it?
Yeah.
Do you remember the promo that we had him hit me with a chair?
Yeah, but because it wasn't a real Royal Rumble, we just cut promos.
Right, but we had the one promo where I went and met up with Pete and hit me with the steel chair. I took that bump so bad that I broke my ribs, but I didn't want him to know in case we had to shoot it again. So I no-sold it the whole time.
Hell yeah.
Because I didn't want him to like not hit me with the chair if he had to hit me again. I was like, dude, you have to hit me with this chair. Like, I don't want you to be scared too. And then I was just like blacking out on the ground because my ribs hurt so bad. So there's a fun broken rib story in the fantasy football industry. I waited like 3 months to tell him.
I need to learn more about this Royal. Was like a 30. How real was this? Or I don't know. I must have missed this whole thing. But
so we did an analyst best ball Royal Rumble where we just did a draft with 12 industry, guys, and we just cut wrestling promos. I mean, I mostly cut wrestling promos.
This was your idea, I imagine.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This was all me.
Yeah.
So,
was that you? Did you do the Steiner one? Did you do the Steiner thing?
Yeah, I did the Scott.
I remember
Steiner math.
Yeah, the Steiner math.
I did the Scott Steiner math. I did a Macho Man. I did a Stone Cold. Yeah, we had fun.
This sounds spectacular. Send me a link. I want to watch it if you have it available. Not right now. We're going to talk about Tiptoes.
Yes.
Tiptoes. All right. Where to start with Tiptoes? I'll just read the synopsis on Rotten Tomatoes. Sometimes you get long synopsises. This is very short. Synopsis? Right? Okay. Tiptoes. Carol falls in love with Steven without knowing much about him, but when she finds herself pregnant, it forces him to expose a secret about his family. Which, by the way, that does nothing to describe this movie. In no way are you prepared for Tiptoes after reading that.
That tiptoes around the entire movie for sure.
Rich, you chose this last week. And you asked me. I kind of chose it, actually. You asked the field. You said, hey, do you want a serious movie or do you want a fun movie? Because we haven't really had a fun movie this season. I'm like, you know what? Let's go with the fun one.
And not like a comedy, like just like a it's like one of these movies that literally doesn't exist, right? Like, because they never
the studios don't want you to know about it.
Well, they didn't really. There was no theatrical release. They showed this at Sundance. Like Rob, I did some research on this movie. Apparently, there's like a 2.5 hour cut of this movie. This director's never directed another movie because I guess they cut the movie that he made. Like Peter Dinklage said, like the original movie's actually like good and has meaning because you can see they want to make like this movie about sensitive issues, but literally everything in this movie is offensive, like absolutely offensive. There's so many ludicrous things that happen in this movie. And the first one is first of all, that the trailer, Rob said the trailer, told me to watch it. They label it as the role of a lifetime.
The role of a lifetime.
The role of a lifetime. For
And the
Gary
music playing over it is so dramatic.
For anyone who doesn't know, Gary Oldman plays a dwarf. But instead of doing like CGI or anything, he just walks on his knees with shoes. They tape they like literally tie his legs like around, where he's like walking on his knees. It's the most ludicrous thing. He just like cuts his arms in, like he keeps his arms like tucked in.
Oh, and it's all noticeable, just so you guys know.
It is.
They don't have like the Forrest Gump, Lieutenant Dan technology. Like they did not have the budget for that.
So even if there is a version of this movie that touches on everything with sensitivity, this would still exist. Like him playing this character would still exist. So I don't know if I fully believe that.
I don't.
But we'll get into some stuff with this movie. But like there are some outlandish things that happen in this movie. But just so you know, possibly the most outlandish thing is the open of this movie, where Matthew McConaughey literally turns down fellatio from Kate Beckinsale.
Yeah,
and it's how the movie opens.
There, that's
he had to go.
Literally how the movie opens.
He had to go.
How the movie starts.
I was in because Kate Beckinsale was there. I'm like, oh, we get Kate Beckinsale, then it can't be
like
that
early
bad.
2000s. Kate Beckinsale.
Still, bro. Still, Kate Beckinsale is quite.
Well,
nice.
this is like underworld like period.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's Gary Oldman, Peter Dinklage, Matthew McConaughey, Kate Beckinsale, Patricia Arquette, David Allen Greer's in for a couple scenes. One really memorable scene. just the whole thing. It's an amazing cast.
It's a fever dream. This movie is an absolute fever dream.
I did the other thing where I'm like, at what point in McConaughey's career is like, why is he in this? Because like, was
Sahara? Like, was this when like Sahara came out?
What does this surround in his career, Deed?
Yeah, so I'm going to pull it up now here because it's in between two of his more famous romantic comedies. Let me go ahead and pull this up as I get to it.
And we'll talk
John,
about McConaughey's character. Each character deserves a segment, though. This movie.
This might be our longest conversation for a movie.
Yeah.
We all have a lot to say.
The actual characters in this movie are batshit. Like whoever wrote these characters,
the motivations are outrageous.
You get you get no storyline
for some reason.
Yeah, you get no backgrounds. You just get characters with no stories. That's the thing.
Ever.
Yeah.
Nowhere in the movie do we get any story about these characters.
We don't know why Peter Dinklage has a French accent. We don't know why him and Gary Oldman were on bikes anyways coming into the city. We never got that background story, why they're even there. We just don't know a lot about this movie except what happens for what I appreciate 90 minutes and then get the fuck out of here because we're not going to tell you anything else.
Sahara was 2005, by the way.
We haven't even talked about Patricia Arquette, who just plays. Why did she take that role? What was going on with Patricia Arquette at the time?
Her character literally is just every questionable decision anyone's ever made in life into a character, and just that. Like that's all we know. And the wardrobe in this movie is absolutely incredible. Like the wardrobes. Kate Beckinsale at one point goes to Matthew McConaughey's job as a firefighter instructor, as a firefighter. We'll get some more of this in a second.
The hat?
But she shows up in like pajamas and like a wizard hat. Like,
did you read the background on the hat?
No, I don't know about the hat.
I don't know about it.
So when she was negotiating for the role, she goes to the director, I'll do it, but I want to wear my lucky hat in the movie. And he's like, sure. And while she was wearing the hat, the director and the producers were fighting on set about making her take the hat off. And he's like, no, I told her she could wear it, so she's wearing it in the movie. So that's why.
But why does that have to be that scene? It could be a different scene, can't it?
Also,
that was a serious scene in theory.
But also,
work. Yeah.
If that's your lucky hat, it's not lucky anymore because now you're in this movie.
She didn't know it at the time. So, by the way, so McConaughey was after Wedding Planner, and you don't really know when this stuff is released, but I'm assuming let's just assume it's in the right order. So, Wedding Planner 2001, that was pretty popular, right? In 2003, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. In between that, Reign of Fire 2002 and Tiptoes 2002. So he was still doing McConaughey romantic comedy things. And again, maybe it had to be a different movie. And like you could definitely, when you're watching this movie, you're like, this doesn't make any at the party. Like McConaughey brings a woman with him, like he kind of introduces her to one of his students. You never see her again.
Never
like,
again.
There's a 15-minute arc on her that we don't know anything about. That's somewhere on the chopping room floor.
We don't know.
There's got to be a storyline.
Well, Peter Dinklage's and Trisha Arquette's storyline just ends. Like apparently they just have like a fight and leave, and it's just over. Like I don't know. Dinklage, there's a lot going on here with Dinklage. He's arguably the most fascinating character in this movie. His French accent at one point he's trying to be so French that he asks for a crepe. Like
yes,
it's the most batshit writing. Like
he should have been the Gary Oldman role, right? We can all agree that should have been a Peter Dinklage role.
I don't know. I don't
like.
know.
I feel like Gary Oldman was the best dwarf in this movie. I don't know. Like,
no, the best dwarf in this movie, the littlest person in this movie is McConaughey. He is like a giant toddler. He's like his reaction to everything in this movie is just like a giant man baby. He is by far the littlest person in this movie.
Also,
speaking of babies, when he had the baby, when the spoiler alert, like it's always a spoiler. We're kind of bouncing around because we have so much to say. But when Beckinsale has the baby, speaking of him being a man baby, he like punches the wall when he realizes his baby's going to be a dwarf. Like he knew this was coming. And, like, just this terrible reaction. Like, how are you guys so calm? Then they keep telling him he's got to go. I just every decision.
Literally,
not worried how this thing got
health of his child or anything. Just punches a hole through the wall.
Yeah,
and we're laughing about all this, but the movie doesn't intend to have one comedic moment. It is trying to be serious throughout the entire film. It just happens to be unintentionally hilarious.
Which is weird.
I think that's true. I just want to point out, according to Rotten Tomatoes, at least, it's listed as a comedy/drama.
It's not
supposed to be funny. I'm just telling you I thought the same thing. Like, is it supposed to be winking at you as like unintentional comedy? I don't know what is the director's intent, the writer's intent? Was it supposed to be funny for real?
So probably the original screenplay was supposed to be a straight comedy. The original cut, like the original screenplay. I don't know how much that screenplay changed over the years, but when the director wrote it, he wrote because he thought that a movie about little people having sex would be funny. That's his exact words that he used when
I mean, there is an actual conversation between Kent Beckinsale and Matthew McConaughey where she asks if he had a circle jerk with I mean, I can't even make this up. I can't.
No, she said he said he did it when he was younger, when he was like 12 years old, and then she's like, "Oh, I would have loved to have been there to see it."
Yeah.
Like, what? That was her response. I wish I would have solved that. What kind of response is that?
Ma'am, that's pedophilia.
That was the most bizarre. Like, what? I think it's the one line that kind of. There's like 100 different things you can point to that kind of blew your mind in this movie.
I mean, McConaughey in this movie though, like as an actual character, is an absolute. It's like he's just like a giant kid. And then the third act in this movie, for resolution, like he goes to the cabin, and you think he's gonna like give her this thing where he wins back. He's like, you know what? Like, I think everyone would just be better off if I just left and went back and like, life's a lot easier in that loft. Just go back and hang out. Like,
remember that character we never showed again? I'm gonna go hang out with her.
Think of the therapy. Think of the therapy that this kid is gonna have. That his uncle is now his dad because his dad didn't want. Like this is.
Well, crazy. That makes none of the characters likable. By the way, I understand like if you're gonna leave Matthew McConaughey's character, you can't start dating the brother, right? You just can't start dating the quote unquote twin brother.
Well, that's the other thing. They're twins, and Gary Oldman's like 20 years older than Matthew McConaughey. Is nobody else going to say this? Like, I actually looked it up. McConaughey is 55 and Oldman's 66. How are they twins? How does this happen?
Yeah,
and again, that's only the 20th most egregious thing about this movie. You're telling me that Gary Oldman and Matthew McConaughey are twins? Look at these two. Yeah.
How do you go your entire relationship without being able to meet families? Yes. Right? Like that's the other thing.
You have a twin.
They're about to get married and they haven't even talked about families. I mean, this is so many unbelievable things that happened in this movie. The fight scene was amazing, by the way. I don't know if anyone wants to talk about
that. The boombox. Who wants to set that up? Because that was Just spectacular stuff.
Absolutely amazing stuff.
And
I mean, there are some
music
scenes in this
selection?
movie. There's a point where just like they're all at this hotel, Patricia Arquette and Peter Dinklage, and like a reasonable thing. The hotel says, "Would you please check out on time?" Or you check out. And Peter Dinklage pulls out a gun, and then Patricia Arquette starts fighting.
As you do.
Like, this is like a reasonable request. They're running.
Yeah.
And the music in that
the
scene is
scene
the
just ends.
worst.
And
Like, of
scene
all
just
the stuff I was talking about, like the music in that scene in particular just does not match up with what's going on, either for comedy or drama. And you're just like, what is happening right now? What is this music? What is this scene? Who are these characters? What is the motorcycle he's riding? Like, dude, why is Gary Oldman dressed like he's in the, like he went to the Salvation Army in the 1970s the entire movie?
Well, they had to give him long pants because they had to hide his legs, right?
Oh,
The whole time you saw him with long pants.
I mean, this is almost the equivalent of blackface for dwarfism. Like,
Yeah.
it's bad. It's really, really.
like it's offensive.
I
And
would assume so.
they were really bad with their forced perspective shots as well. Like, just some of those forced perspective shots was just like awful, where other movies like Lord of the Rings, which obviously one of the
Right.
greatest trilogies
Like
of
when you
all
have
time,
stand-ins, yeah.
So help
really
me explain. You were talking about how, spoiler alert, Kate Beckinsale ends up with McConaughey's brother. What did she like? He seemed like a nice guy, but like he wasn't. They didn't see each other a lot. Like, what made her say, "All right, this is the guy for me"? And like, I don't know how like he won her over. Like, it seemed like he wasn't even trying to win her over.
Probably all those inappropriate kisses on the lips that they were having as they were leading up to it.
He
What
just
was
wasn't.
that?
He literally just wasn't Matthew McConaughey. Just wasn't a child.
Yeah,
The most bizarre ending of this movie too. Obviously, there's more to this that would have happened, but
And the director's like, I really want my cut to come out sometime. Why?
you can kiss me if you want. That's how the movie ends.
I don't pay. I want to see it. You guys don't want to see it? That's my next movie.
2.5 hours of this movie. Ugh, I don't know.
I need to see more.
Because even if there's a good movie, Gary Oldman is still playing that character.
Yeah.
In a role of a lifetime.
Daigle, you've been uncomfortably quiet through most of this.
I'm just listening I'm listening to everyone's perspective. But I said my piece. This movie was a lot. You didn't. Well, maybe you heard me. I don't know if you were logged in already, Rob, but I watched it twice because I thought I was like, did I just watch that movie? And I turned it back on. A lot like how I listened to Kanye's Dark Twisted Fantasies. Was like, did I just hear that? And then I need to re-listen to it right afterwards. Yeah.
Did you catch anything different the second time around? Like, oh my God, I missed that the first time. That's even more bonkers. Did it make more sense watching the second time?
No, it made it more perplexing. What I also did, because again, I was so enamored by it, I then started looking up movie review podcast of like comedic podcasts. So How Did This Get Made was one of them, but I also listened to a couple other podcasts that like dissected it just for comedic value, because again, there's so much here. And honestly, like the most topical point was Kate Beckinsale's headwear, because it's different every scene, like literally every scene.
There's another scene where she's like wearing like a corset, like at one point, like what? It's her outfits are absolutely bonkers.
We've gone this long. We have not mentioned the dad doing the fart poem at the dinner outside.
The dinner scene in general is absolutely incredible. It's literally like it rivals The Office. Dinner's like the dinner's.
I thought it was like an SNL skit.
It is the Fishes episode. It's the equivalent to the bear for dwarfism. Like, it's just, this episode that segment is in your face. And it is the most awkward shit I've ever seen in my life.
Kate Beckinsale,
the dude that plays Beckinsale's dad he's like, I'm in this movie. I'm going for it.
Yeah.
Beckinsale not giving her parents a heads up that not as a negative, not just like as a heads up, like just by the way, just don't let this alarm you. But McConaughey's, his family is poor. Like, didn't tell her parents. That just seems like something that you would mention that.
There's a conversation
after he had just done it to her. After he had just done it to her.
Yeah, literally the same thing. There's a conversation that her dad has, like a typical, like cliche, like, father of my wife. And he's like, he said McConaughey's like a firefighter, a fire instructor. And the dad asks, like, is fighting fires a lucrative business? And he's like, yeah, he's like, fires will never go down in a recession. Like, I'm just like, what is happening right now? Like, who wrote this? Like, what is happening?
There's always fires, so you can count on them. Is that place too nice for what they do? He's a firefighter instructor, and she's an artist, and they had this really beautiful loft. I don't know. Weren't they like in LA or somewhere? They're somewhere in Los Angeles.
Yeah, they were in LA.
I know, again, I'm nitpicking here because that, again, like the 70th most egregious thing, but their place seemed way too nice for what, unless she's an incredible artist. We just don't realize this.
I don't know. Instructing firefighters seems like it could be lucrative. It's your own business. I don't know, because firefighters make good money.
Sure, but like, again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's expensive to live. The overwhelming point is it's like that's a big space for LA.
It is a big space.
Again, I'm probably picking the parsley. We should be talking about the steak, but I don't know. People in chat, I would wish people would like watch the movies and kind of hang out and like discuss it with us. But I'm really curious to get the grades as far as I'm dying to know what tight end we're gonna get from Rich.
This is a tough. It's tough, man. This for a tight end pool.
It's got to be some sort of converted wide receiver into a tight end for this one.
Why was Dag in this movie? Because I think he was in 2 scenes. Like maybe like he had like 2 days on set or something. Basically.
No, he just needed some money, man. His actually makes it David Ongreer.
It's just it's just straight. Again, he probably had a bigger role and like this didn't. Very ambitious one. One of the scenes are really just really ambitious.
I also don't get why when they have the baby, all the hospital workers are also small.
So I think one of the characters said, like, when they were having that conversation at dinner, and I didn't know these places exist, and now they do exist, but like we have hospitals, we have information, kind of like implying that there was a place like specially available for you. And I don't know if that's something that exists, but that's what I thought was happening. But that is, what are the odds, right? I don't know. This movie is bonkers.
The David Alan Grier scene where he's with Bridget the midget, which we didn't mention, is also in this movie, which is wild. Who hit the guy at the boombox? Right, hit the guy at the boombox. When they're fooling around at the party, like that whole room is just glass, so it's not hiding anything. It's not like you know what I mean. Like
the middle of a party,
party can see.
Well, again, this goes back to your quote that you had earlier about the director just literally wanted to make porn.
That's true. It's what do you want to do? So, I'm perplexed by how he got this cast together for this.
It's 2003.
Who read this movie? Like, how did these people and their agents like agree that this was like the proper thing to do at the time?
And again, McConaughey was in the zone. It wasn't like desperate McConaughey where his career is flopping and flailing. He was like knocking out romantic comedies. I don't under the other thing is that 2003. Did you have a boombox in 2003? Did anybody have a boombox in 2003?
I used to record songs on tape cassettes from the radio, and that's how I would play mixtapes to myself while playing Madden. Yes.
In 2003?
Yeah, the boombox. Yeah.
Okay. I thought they were kind of getting phased out, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I don't think so. You could do that on boomboxes, right? That's how I did it.
I had to drive around with a boombox for like a month when my CD player broke in my car, which was also 1996 Geo Metro hatchback. So basically, pregnant purple roller skate that I was driving, 3 cylinders, boombox in the passenger seat so that I could listen to music while driving. Great times.
I think it might be 2 different things, but like, I'm curious what our scores are for this movie and how it's a really tough movie to score because it was entertaining in its own like despicable way. It was more fun than Money Plane. Like Money Plane was just bad.
But if you didn't go into this movie with knowing like it was a disaster, because we all did know this, like your opinion I think would be a lot different.
Certainly, if you watch the trailer, you thought you were watching something else.
So originally, I guess they showed this at Sundance, and this is why they pulled it from a theatrical release. Like, imagine going to Sundance and seeing this. You're like, Gary Oldman, McConaughey. Like, you're looking at this, like this is gonna be a movie. And
did you? So they screened whatever film fest they went to first. They screened the original version, and then at the next one, they cut it and they didn't tell the director, and they had to drag him off the stage because he was so pissed.
Yeah, he's like literally never made another movie because
of how much he flipped out over this movie.
And we've said it earlier, but we need the director's cut here. We need the extra film.
Yeah,
the director's name is Matthew Bright, by the way, and apparently I did a little bit of research on this too because I'm like, who's Matthew Bright? And he wrote a Ted Bundy movie in 2002. I don't know if anybody watched that movie, but apparently that movie's kind of bonkers. Now I know Ted Bundy's had a rebirth on Netflix, but in 2002 there's a Ted Bundy movie that's not really well ranked, 5.8 on IMDb. But I was trying to figure out what he's done lately, and yeah, he has not written anything since 2004, and I don't know if like you said, he's not allowed. I don't know. They just kicked him out of Hollywood altogether. Yeah, this is the last movie he directed. He did direct the Ted Bundy movie, and he directed Freeway in 1996. Isn't that Reese Witherspoon? And she was really young.
That was before she made it big with Fear. Like they came out the same year. Freeway is what got him the role because everyone loved Freeway at the time. So that's what got him jobs afterwards. It was like, oh, the director of Freeway. That's why I think people did this movie and then did not go according to plan for anybody. The role of a lifetime, though.
The role of a lifetime.
I just can't. I want to know the 30 for 30, like how everybody said yes. Like, how did McConaughey get attached? Like Arquette, Beckinsale was still a star. Like, I just don't. All of it doesn't make any sense. But
I watched a quick interview with her after I watched the movie from a few years ago, just her talking about this movie, and she's like, "Do not watch it." She's just telling everybody, "Don't watch it." Like she literally goes, "Watch the trailer, don't watch the movie," and she talks about how bad of a movie it was. Like everyone from it has disowned it and distanced themselves as much as they can from it.
All right, let's go ahead and guess what the critics think of this movie before we put our official score on it. We'll go IMDb first. IMDb 1 through 10 is their rating. John, you're gonna set the bar. Where is Tiptoes on IMDb?
It can't be high. I can't imagine it's high. Let's go 4. No pun intended.
4. Okay, Rob.
Let's see. It's really bad, but Gary Oldman's in the role of a lifetime. 3.1.
Yeah, I was gonna say 3.5.
So IMDb score is it's hard to get a 10 and it's also hard to get a 1.
Yeah.
So the official score is actually 4.2. So
no. Come on.
Yeah, John. Well, I'm just telling you what the score is. John did a great job.
I'm gonna vote on it right now and try to lower it.
6,000 people. 6,000 people is
or give it a 10.
Pool.
I don't know. I'm either gonna give it a 10 or 1.
I don't know what to give.
No.
So I was curious. I'm like, what else got like a 4.2? I was trying to get a comp, and I went through, and a lot of the movies I couldn't even recognize. It was like movies like you'd never even heard of. But Norbit, remember Norbit, the Eddie Murphy vehicle?
Oh, yeah,
that also got a 4.2. If you want to know where it's at, the level it's at, Norbit is also got a 4.2.
I feel like every Eddie Murphy movie after like 1997 or maybe even 1996 is a 4.2.
He's had a couple mixed in, but yeah, it hasn't been the best run. There's a couple good ones. Dolomite's pretty good. That's a good Eddie Murphy movie on Netflix actually. But let's do Rotten Tomatoes. John, you go first at Rotten Tomatoes. Well, you went first last time. Rich, Rotten Tomatoes.
For critics or both, or just do both? I'll say.
Give me both.
Critics, 0%. Well, I guess that's not. Yeah, it's gotta be like 5 then, because right? Isn't there something holds the record for like being like the lowest rated movie or something?
I should say this. There's only 10 critics that dared enough to review
this movie. Didn't release. Like it didn't release.
Yeah. So, 2,500 in the public, but only 10 is your pool.
I'll say
this number is like not really a fair. It's not a fair.
5%. One of the 10 liked it, so 10%, and then I'll say 20% audience.
Rob,
I was going to take 10%, but I'll do 20% for the critics. 23% for the audience.
And John,
I'm going with my original guesses. I'm going to go 9%. And then for the audience, I think we're going to get some comedic upvotes. So let's go 35%.
So 2 out of 10 of the reviewers liked it. It was funny. I went through the reviews. I was trying, and like one of them was French. The review was in French, so I guess they liked the Peter Dinklage character.
Yeah,
must have nailed it. Must have nailed it.
Which was just bonkers.
Like, yeah, Americans always do come back to war.
his accent also like periodically dipped into like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Predator, like periodically like dipped into it.
22% from the audience. So somebody said 23. I think Rob said 23. Wow. I was also reading some of the reviews, just kind of going through and just reading some of the submitted, that damn fake James Brown wig, man. Just like the things offensive, too many endings. You can kiss me if you want, and then it rolls the credits. One of the worst movies I've ever seen.
I will say, because this is a movie that like I've heard about being a disaster for so long on things. I'm glad that I experienced it. It is an absolute fever dream.
Yeah,
I'm glad I experienced it too. But again, it's the tricky part now. Where like, do you recommend this to somebody? You have to
you have to know that you have to know who you're recommending it to.
Correct.
You got to know your audience. You got to know your audience for sure.
It's a 0.7 for me. I'm just going to give my score out of the way.
Well, so you can't. But does it vary depending on who you're at, like who's asking, or just a 0.7 and that's that?
It's a 0.7. Because it's fun, but there's very few people I could recommend this movie to.
Yeah,
find it fun like we did, and it's just every aspect of this movie is bad for the most part, from music to actual filming. Like shots are bad in this. Like just everything is bad. There's stuff that you see that you shouldn't see. Like you see Gary Oldman's legs in a scene or two. It's just bad filmmaking. It's a bad movie. It's a 0.7. The 0.7 is the redeemable part where I can tell people to watch this movie that I know would enjoy it.
John, what's your scale, and what are you giving on that scale? Because I think Rob's 1 through 5 or 0 through 5, I suppose.
Yeah.
What's yours, John?
Yeah, we're going back to a wrestler. That's the new grading scale for me.
That's right.
And I need to set you up. I need a backstory to explain to you, Dean, because in 2007, there was a hot wrestler who was getting the crowd cheering, looked good, blonde hair, old school wrestling tights, named Mr. Kennedy. The mic would even fall down from the ceiling and he'd introduce himself. And the idea then, because he was getting hot in the crowd, was to introduce him, start building a storyline where he would be Vince McMahon's illegitimate son. And then once that was revealed months later, he would fight Triple H at WrestleMania because Triple H asked Stephanie McMahon, as Vince McMahon's brother or son-in-law, he would then fight Vince McMahon's illegitimate son. That's like the whole buildup. Then within a week of unveiling the main part of that story about Mr. Kennedy, he got suspended for steroids at that time. So they had to quickly, within 1 week on Raw, before Raw, try to figure out a new plan. And what instead happened was they said the illegitimate son for Vince McMahon at the end of Raw is my grade for this movie, Hornswoggle, a leprechaun who jumped up dressed in green, and Vince McMahon then later fought him in a steel cage match that included whipping his son with a leather belt. So this movie to me, the grade is Hornswoggle.
That's good. I think we needed that backstory. I like that backstory. I feel like I learned a lot. That's good. That's perfect. That's a spectacular grade. Rich, what do you got?
I narrowed it down. I think I'm gonna go with Irv Smith Jr. for this one. When you see it on the surface, you're interested. Second round pick, went to Alabama. They had the measurables.
Looks good.
But then it was just bad. It became a meme. Like that's the best I could do, I think, for this. I thought a different couple angles. I think they were all gonna be offensive. So Irv Smith Jr.
Well, Irv Smith Jr. himself was offensive.
I hope Hornswoggle wasn't offensive. It fit though.
Oh, we just got canceled, Daigle.
Yeah,
don't worry. We got canceled from that one.
It was the only proper grade.
I'll give it I go on a 100-point scale. I mean, see, it's the sliding scale because I think it's a fun movie to watch with somebody else. Like I watched it by myself. I probably would have enjoyed it more with like just hanging around with a bunch of people watch. It's probably a funny movie, like in an atmosphere in a theater. People would actually show up for this in the theater. But I can't really blindly recommend it to anybody. But again, you could specifically recommend it to people like within context. But I mean, it's terrible. It really is terrible. I'll give it a 20 just because again, I want I feel like people should see it, and I want to give it a 20 if that makes sense. You should see this.
I feel like people should just know it exists for the fact that they hold these other people accountable. Like I want to hold Gary Oldman accountable for this movie.
At least watch the trailer is what I will say. At minimum, watch the trailer.
Yeah. I'm not recommending it, but I'm also thinking like it wouldn't hurt to watch. John, we have to talk about your movie. Do you have? We talked about it. Well, have you figured out what you're doing this week?
Dude. I should have won. This is BS. I'm very upset.
Why should you have won, Rob?
Just because I had a really good team this week, and I should have.
Yes, fair enough.
Sure.
John's team was better.
Yeah. I just played Tucker Kraft. I felt much better when I saw your tight end. I was like, okay, I played Tucker Kraft. I'm good, dude.
Yeah.
I didn't get blocked there. We blocked each other on the other spots in the late slate.
Yeah.
So this was very fun. I would like to come down from it. And when I won in week 1, we picked a movie in week 2. I gave everyone options, and we did not pick the other one I wanted to see, and Rich wanted to see as well. So I'm not giving you options this week. We're all just going to go straight to Godzilla -1 so I can finally watch it as I've been waiting for. And we will come back and talk about what's supposed to be a very good movie, unlike Tiptoes.
So just to clarify, Netflix gives you the option, at least they did give the option. My understanding, there's a black and white version of it. We're watching the color version of it or the black and white version?
I'll let you choose. They're the same, right?
My understanding is it's the same movie. Yeah,
okay,
it's just the color's different.
Watch whichever one you'd like to.
Okay.
I don't even know what it's about. I just know friends told me to watch it.
I mean,
spoiler alert.
There's a giant lizard.
I'm gonna just guess.
To be fair, they did make a Godzilla movie where he's not in the movie.
Yeah.
Did they really?
Outside of the obvious, I don't know what it is. Yeah.
The Cranston one. I think he's in 10 minutes of it, but the Cranston.
I didn't see it. But yeah, I actually did see this months ago, but I'm up for watching it again.
I have not seen it still since we have talked about it.
Same. So I'm excited to watch it.
Cool. All right. We gave the people an hour and a half plus of NFL content, 40 minutes of nonsense. We appreciate those.
If I win, I'm making us watch the Aaron Hernandez show.
Oh my
God.
The
entire show?
Seen the clips?
Dude, some of the clips of the show are absolutely outrageous.
The documentary is really good.
The Robert Kraft guy.
Did you see the Gronk?
The Gronk
one. I have
one.
not seen Gronk yet.
Looney Bin one. I just saw it tonight. Unreal.
Is it the same people that did the casting for the Clippers? Because I don't know if you guys watched the clip, because I know it's an FX show as well. They're both FX shows. But
the Belichick war room of selecting Aaron Hernandez, the clips. I've never watched the actual show. I've just seen these clips that float around. On the old tweet machine. It looks incredible.
Yeah. I kind of want to watch it just because it is 100% a train wreck.
I watched the Clippers one clipped, and again, it's one of those things I wasn't sure if they were trying to be funny or not. I feel like that's the same thing with I don't know if they're trying to make jokes or not trying to make jokes. So it's unintentionally funny, but
I don't think they are.
Well, again, if you watch clips, you feel like they're making jokes sometimes, but I don't know.
Which is funny because that Lakers show was awesome. That got canceled with John C. Reilly.
Yeah,
I love that show. That show was great. Winning Time was awesome. So
we're getting a lot of this stuff now. I think it's in part because of the success of Winning Time. FX is running through some teams, but all right, we got to step aside and get out of here. I do appreciate y'all listening. Thanks to producer Steve. Shout out to producer Steve and his Mets. He was excited, but he was watching his Mets during the game. The Mets did win, so Steve's got to be in a good mood. There he is. Steve is still celebrating the 4-1 victory for the Mets. Rich Hribar.
He's celebrating because he didn't watch Tiptoes.
We told him he should watch it, but not really. Well, I think he at least watched the trailer. I'm pretty sure.
He was watching the Mets. It's okay.
Yeah, understood. All right. Rob, Steve, Rich, John, I'm Dean. Go win something this week in week 6. We're out of here. Holler.